messages are visible and not just the top messages. Okay, welcome everyone. I apologize for the tardiness. We had to completely set up a new studio because normally I film in the tiny room in the back of the apartment. And for today's how to draft and cut a train for your Burgundian gown medieval sewing party, I need a lot more floor space. So we had to completely figure out everything again. Right, but of course, as always, we'll be starting with checking that my microphone's on. Checking that you can actually hear me. So just let me know if you all can hear me or not. And also, we'll be starting with the conventional getting dressed. I also had a question in yesterday's medieval sewing party about medieval cosmetics. And so I fished out of my cosmetics basket my jar of reproduction it's called actually a sun cream, but it basically acts as a foundation that is a reproduction of the recipe from the Trotula by Cosmetica Obscura. So I was going to demonstrate applying that so you can see just how white can really get. Yes, I know you think I'm white. It's about to get whiter in here. So So of course I'm already wearing my smock. This is the foundational linen undergarment that men and women wore. And this is the layer that gets washed. It is made of geometric construction. So it's got triangles to create width in between a series of rectangles. And this is one of the most efficient ways you can make garments without wasting any fabric. So it's known as geometric construction. This is what it looks like from behind. And some of you have heard me say, and I'll say it again, unfortunately, I mismeasured somehow and I cut this way too big. So this is actually big enough for someone who is significantly larger than I am. I don't really care enough to actually take it in anywhere because it would involve removing gores, and I hand sewed this thing entirely. I'm always really loath to remove any seams that involve hand sewing. So yeah. So on top of this layer comes the Kirtle, Kirtle. It's Kirtle. It is spelt at least 20 different ways in 15th century English. It's known as a cote or a cote simple in French. It's called a gamora in Italian. And it's also called a Kirtle or a Kirtle in 15th century Scots. So this is the next layer. This is still, however, considered underwear for a noble lady. But you're going to get to see me today doing something a noble woman never would have done in the 15th century, which is drafting and cutting a gown. Because by the 15th century, we have professional tailors. They do all of that sewing work, especially for members of the upper levels of society. Because in the 15th century noble women didn't have the leisure to be making their own clothes. They had a lot of work they had to do every day. So this garment, this kirtle, is lined only to about mid-thigh, just above the thigh, basically. And that is exactly the way one of the few extant gowns from the 15th century is also lined, the gamora of Beata Ossana Andreazzi. Right? Her gown, her gamora, her kirtle, as it would be called in English, is only lined to about here. And so I have taken that approach going forward to basically all of my kirtles and gowns, unless I have specific reason to line them fully. A kirtle generally doesn't have a reason to be lined fully. However, there are some kirtles in the expense accounts of Margaret of Denmark that are fully lined. Margaret of Denmark was the Queen of Scotland in the last quarter of the 15th century. And her expense accounts do contain references to kirtles that have linings that are big enough to be the whole gown. And the reason I think she was lining her kirtles, in addition to lining the gowns that go over top, is because the Little Ice Age is getting into full swing by the end of the 15th century, and Edinburgh is not a very warm place. So I'm confident that she was having her kirtles lined, and sometimes retroactively, right after the gown had been initially made. I'm pretty certain she was having her kirtles lined because it was getting cold. I, on the other hand, do not live in the Little Ice Age. I live in a period of global warming, and so I do not see the need to fully line my kirtles in addition to lining my gowns, which all my gowns are lined. But today we're going to be working on a Burgundian style gown, right? The quintessential princess dress that will not be fully lined because I'm actually making a simpler version of it. What I would say a more workaday top layer rather than the super elaborate gowns that I've made thus far with really long trains. I would like an elegant top layer that would be worn by a lady of high rank and means, but one that doesn't have an 8 to 10 foot train. So that's what I'm working on now. It's made out of a super fine black wool, as you're going to see, but it will have a much more modest train and will be shorter on the sides than all of my gowns have been thus far in the Burgundian fashion. And that's because I do want something that I can go on pilgrimage with, say, for instance, or in which I could easily and comfortably go for a walk through the woods without worrying about taking half the forest with me on my way out. So right now I'm just lacing up my kirtle. This is a technique called spiral lacing, and it's called that because you literally spiral up the gown. Right? It's basically like whip stitching your dress shut. And these holes in this kirtle, as we say modernly, are actually punched into, they're holes in the gown, right? They're not lacing rings, but lacing rings are also an option in this era. So you basically have two options for lacing holes in for a kirtle of this style. We see lacing rings, and we see them both on the top of the kirtle, but also hidden just on the inside. And I do have a kirtle with hidden lacing rings. It's a black one that I have. And then you can also see them lacing rings on the top, and then there's the option of just using an awl to poke a hole, and then you finish the hole with buttonhole stitches. Now, if you would like to see a tutorial on how to make lacing holes properly in the medieval fashion, strong, sturdy lacing holes that will withstand all manner of abuse, then I have a tutorial for that on this channel. So just keep that in mind if you would like to learn how to make lacing holes the medieval way. I do provide step-by-step instructions, but it's a pretty short video, so you won't have to spend too much time watching it in order to be able to make your own beautiful lacing holes. I'm just seeing why I am not seeing any chat messages. Well, that's fun. Okay, well, if for whatever reason, and I don't know why, but for whatever reason, my chat is not showing me any comments. So if you're watching, if you could just leave a comment so that I know that my chat is actually functioning, because right now I have yet to see a single message. And I'm just wondering if it's the technology goblins messing with me again, as they are very wont to do, unfortunately. So the lace that I'm using to lace this dress up is one of my what we would say in modernly finger loop braided laces, but in the 15th century it just would have been called a lace. That's what it would have been called. No reference to the actual technique used is ever made. They're just referred to as laces. Because in the 15th century, the only kind of lace was the kind of lace that you made with this technique that we now call finger loop braiding. And if you'd like to learn how to make your own laces, like this kind for lacing things up, there is also a video on this channel, a tutorial for complete beginners, describes everything that you need to know step by step to walk away with a beautiful and yet practical lace that you could use to lace up your dress or as trim around the collar of your garments or your headdresses or hats if you wanted. So here we go, all laced up. This lace is a little too short for this dress, but that's okay. It will be fine for our purposes today. So today I'm going to be demonstrating the cutting and drafting of the train for the back of my new Burgundian gown. So as you see me now, I am definitely not fully dressed to actually leave my private chambers and go out in a public venue, at least not as a noblewoman. Certainly working women who were craftswomen, women who were labored in the fields, servants who were out doing dirty work, laundresses, absolutely would wear just what you're seeing now out when doing their work, but they would definitely not.
Yeah, read the comments while I try and figure out your phone.
Yeah, no, the comments for whatever reason, everyone. So thankfully, unfortunately, maybe you need to be here for this so you can tell me the comments. No, I'm not seeing the comments at all. Nope.
There you go.
I
I fixed it.
I put it on all
I
comments.
know. It has a thing where if it doesn't click immediately, you got to switch it between the different types of comments.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a pain.
I hate technology. I hate modern technology so much. Okay, did I miss any
Is there a
questions?
German name for the
Oh,
or for the shift? I'm not sure.
so yeah, so the German name for this is Hemd, which we would call shirt, which is the modern German word for shirt. So they call the smock, they call a Hemd. And I'm actually not certain about this interim layer. I haven't really looked at that many German sources for 15th century clothing. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not certain if there's a differentiation in women's clothing. I know about men's clothing more in German than I do about women's because I haven't really done much detailed research into women's clothing in the 15th century in Germany.
Like in the Netherlands, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Say hi to Susan.
Hi, Susan. Thank you for joining us.
Edward's on.
Edward, welcome back.
Mary Augusta, she's back.
Oh, Mary Augusta, welcome back. Thank you for making the journey back again.
Dawn says, what a beautiful dress. Glad to have caught this live. And happy day of thanks.
Yeah, so, okay, so.
Emilian Nunez.
Emilian Nunez. Okay, well, welcome everyone. I can now see the comments again. Now I'm caught up. Now I can see the comments again. Right. Okay.
And
so
audio is really good.
Audio is great. Yes, it's because I have a microphone today because I'm not multi-streaming. I'm streaming only to YouTube today. Because I'm going to be working around on the ground and I'm not going to always be looking, or rarely will I be looking at the camera today because of what I'm going to be doing. So I needed to be mic'd up for this. Okay, so this, as I was saying, this ensemble, the kirtle and the smock, we know this is underwear, and we know it was considered underwear, and we know it was considered not completely dressed because we actually have court cases from the 15th century in France and England that talk about women who were being abducted. Apparently happens a lot in the 15th century, usually to kind of force a marriage, usually because the woman is a widow and she's wealthy. There it is. Anyway, glossing over that bit of horror, in these court records, it talks about, it'll detail what happened. And it'll say that so-and-so was abducted all naked, wearing naught but her smock and kirtle, which means that in the 15th century mind, this is still naked. It's not the modern idea of naked, obviously, because the modern idea of naked is, skin. But that's not the medieval idea of naked. The medieval idea of naked, and this also bears itself out in other ways. For instance, there is a travel vlog written at the end of the 14th century by a Catalan viscount who goes to St. Patrick's Purgatory on pilgrimage to St. Patrick's Purgatory in Ireland. And he observes how the women are dressed at the court of King O'Neill. He calls him King O'Neill. Right. And he says that it's so strange because the women and the men are all naked. And then he goes on to talk about all these clothes they are wearing. So in his mind, they were still naked because they weren't wearing the requisite number of layers to be proper for a court, for a royal court. Right. He talks about them wearing their shirts, and he talks about them wearing a tunic, but not the right kind of tunic, and wearing nothing but their shirt and a cloak. And he calls that naked. Right. So we have to remember that even if you might have the same word in a medieval text, and there's a modern word that is almost the same, that doesn't mean that it has anything like the same meaning or the same implications. So technically here, as you see me dressed, I'm still naked. You're welcome. But these are the working layers. We know this is how women who worked. This is how they dressed when they did their work, because we have depictions of women doing various forms of labor that have them dressed like this. And we know that noble women in various levels, in various parts of medieval Europe, 15th century Europe, still had to do some things that would be considered dirty work. Sometimes they actually had to go and inspect the grain, the barrels of grain, right, when they were checking up on their stewards to make sure they weren't being embezzled or scammed. And so they'd actually have to literally roll up their sleeves and stick their arms into barrels of grain. And they'd have to do all sorts of things that were maybe not easy to do if you're wearing all the layers. So Today, I'm going to be doing something that is absolutely not easy to do if I'm wearing a gown with a 12-foot train on top of all of this. And so hence I am dressing like this. So I like to say that I'm a 15th century noblewoman cosplaying a peasant, basically. So for that, we're going to put on my 15th century cosplay peasant's kerchief. This is a style of headdress that is worn in France and the Low Countries, what is now the Netherlands and Belgium, and in England in the sort of second half of the 15th century. And you can see it also depicted on some noble women, some ladies who are queens, when they are in their private chambers, just sort of casual. So yes, even though you do see peasants wearing these sorts of head coverings, we have visual evidence of women who are queens and ladies of high rank, when they're alone depicted in their chambers writing letters, for instance, they are wearing just basically what you see me in now. So that is why I call this my medieval Lululemon casual. Because for a 15th century noblewoman in sort of France, the Low Countries, Belgium, and probably England as well, this would be your casual, I'm in my private quarters with maybe just my 20 favorite ladies. Doing my thing without any pressure from having to look a certain way for the court. Yep. Okay, so I did promise that I would also show you this 12th century, well, originally from the 12th century source of makeup, but it's the Trotula, which is a manuscript originally composed in 12th century Salerno, Italy, the Amalfi Coast, right? It actually ends up being copied again and again and again, all the way up to and including the 15th century. So even though it originates in the 12th century, we have good evidence that people were still using it up until the 15th century. So it is perfectly reasonable that this little jar of cream was used as composed in this recipe, was utilized by women in the 15th century, Italian women in the 15th century. And, the trotula is copied all over. It's not just in Italy where it gets copied. There's editions in France, for example. Yeah, so let me just check the comments. Okay. Sorry, just trying to get the comments to actually show up in case anyone actually did. Okay, great. Okay, so this is a modern jar. This is not a medieval jar. Would not have been glass. I have some little medieval pots here. Here, I'll show you what a medieval jar would have looked like for this item, hopefully. Okay, well, I don't know where the condottiero put them. He put them away somewhere where I thought I knew where they were, but apparently I was wrong. I don't. I actually have reproduction medieval jars somewhere. Oh well, things got put away where I don't know where they are, so I can't show you. Anyway, they're little clay pots basically, and they're glazed on the inside so that the substance doesn't get absorbed. Okay, so this one is made with olive oil, duck fat, beeswax, camphor oil, nutmeg oil, clove oil, and titanium dioxide. The original would have been made with lead, with white lead, which, as we know, is super bad for you, and it's super bad for your skin, and it gets absorbed into your bloodstream through your skin. So second drawer down in the middle of the heat map. So Cosmetica Obscura sells this, and if you would, I highly recommend their products, and I do have a discount code for them. Hopefully my condottiero will pop it in the chat there for you. No, this cream is not good for hair. This cream is for your skin. They do have, however, there are hair oils from these medieval sources that are good for some kinds of hair. So remember, not everyone's hair is the same. Not everyone's hair reacts well to oils and fats, actually. So you kind of have to know what's good for your hair. But this one is good for your skin, and it's very moisturizing, and it's very rich. And the titanium dioxide takes the place of the white lead. And so this is what it looks like. And we know that the Salernitan women used this as a sun cream because the original recipe actually talks about this being a way to protect against the sun and keep their skin white, right? So this is literally a 12th century mineral blocker. So yeah, medieval people had a lot of solutions for problems we have now. And instead, we've moved on to chemicals that are super bad for you and that can actually cause cancer when exposed to UV rays. But this is a mineral blocker, which means it physically blocks the light of the sun. So I'm just going to actually, I don't want to be crouched down, so I'm going to raise this up now that I'm dressed so that I can stand comfortably and put this on. Give me a moment. Okay. Right. Okay. So you're going to be shocked by how white this is. It does eventually absorb into your skin. It feels super nice and it smells super nice. The thing about these medieval cosmetics and creams, see what I mean? It will absorb in. It's alarming for now, but don't worry. It doesn't take much. It does eventually absorb in. It gets less white on top of your skin. But the thing about the way these smell, they smell luscious, but they don't smell luscious the way modern people expect things to smell. Right? It smells luscious the way medieval people did. So instead of smelling sweet and flowery, it smells spicy, right? It smells like pumpkin pie. I probably put way too much on. So I'm probably going to have to go and get some. So it's not supposed to be this white. This is like Elizabeth I white. I put way too much on. You don't need much. You really don't. It doesn't take much. But, and of course the light from the ring light is really reflecting off of it pretty harshly. Yeah. So it does eventually absorb in, but this is, I know it looks bright, but it is actually pretty close to what you would want, especially if you're looking to protect your skin from the harsh light of the Mediterranean sun, right? You can see it's getting less alarming. It smells a bit like pumpkin pie. Yep. It smells a little bit like pumpkin pie because of the cloves and the nutmeg oil, right? But not, it doesn't smell like fake pumpkin pie smell. It smells like real pumpkin pie. Okay, so this is basically more or less what the foundation would have looked like for a medieval woman. Now, over top of this would come some rouge. I don't have any. No, I don't have any of the medieval rouge, which is also used for giving some color to the lips as well, especially when you accidentally completely cover it, right? And of course, this would be brought down and cover all the skin that would possibly be exposed to the sun because medieval women didn't want brown skin and they didn't want wrinkles, although they didn't know necessarily that the sun led to wrinkles. I'm pretty certain they figured it out, though, that women who exposed themselves to the sun got developed more wrinkles than women who didn't, right? A ghost, very funny. Yeah, it goes a long way, right? But you can see it's already absorbing in as it does. See, it's getting much less stunning. And as the day progresses, it will become less and less white. And not because it's rubbing off, because it doesn't. I don't touch my face almost at all. It just, absorbs in slightly. Gets less brilliant. This is not the face and neck salve. This is called the 12th century foundation, right? So Cosmetica Obscura doesn't want to call it a sunblock because they haven't actually tested SPF or anything like that, so they don't want to misadvertise, but the original recipe refers to it as a sun cream. It's for keeping the skin white from the sun, right? And it's for specifically, it's referred to in the original recipe. It says that the Salernitan women are the ones who use this to keep their faces white, right? Okay, right. So that is basically the level of white that they would achieve. This is the ideal in the Middle Ages, for much of the Middle Ages across Europe, right? There's not much that's sort of uniform, but one of the things that crops up really often in the romances, in poems, in other kinds of even tales where they're comical tales, is talking about the whiteness, the snowy whiteness of the heroine's skin, how beautiful and snowy white her skin is. And so now maybe you can get an idea of the level of snowy white that they were trying to achieve. Yeah, there's a different salve for the breast. I'm not going to break that out. But this is specifically, this is not a salve. This is for keeping your skin white. It is medieval sunblock. But Cosmetica Obscura is not going to call it that because, again, they don't want to get sued. They haven't tested the SPF in any sort of rigorous way, and there's not necessarily, all of that sort of regulatory stuff to be able to call it a sunblock. But it's a medieval sun cream. That's what the original recipe calls it. Yep. So there you go. This is how white. Now, again, I've got a white ring light there, so it's actually making me extra white. It's not, it's not necessarily that stunning. Okay, great. Any questions? Any questions about the ensemble, the aesthetics of 15th century makeup? Just let me know. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and get set up for the next part of our party, which is the medieval sewing party part. And today I'm going to be hopefully finishing cutting out. I didn't get all the fabric and my assistant is not here. Well, hopefully he'll be back by the time we get to that point. I'm going to be showing you how to basically draft a train for your dress. And this is not going to be a really long train, not like the trains of some of my other gowns. And first I'm going to talk to you about the nature of a train. So when you have a dress and it has a train, people think that if they want a 10-foot train, like 10 feet gown, 10 feet behind them, that they need to cut 10 feet past their hemline. But that's not how trains work. And I can actually show you on this. If you want 10 feet of fabric behind you, you actually cut not 10 feet, you only cut a couple of feet. Because as you walk, the train pulls out, right? You can see that. So there's actually this angle and it actually pulls out behind you. So you don't actually want to have 10 feet in addition to the length of your skirt if you just want your gown to train 10 feet behind you. So keep that in mind. I haven't actually figured out the exact formula for that, but if you add 10 feet to your skirt, then you're going to end up with some like 15 feet of train or more behind you. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Can you talk about medieval makeup? It will be nice and exciting. Well, yeah. So I mentioned this yesterday. I don't have any of the other bits for makeup, but the next thing that would come on would be some rouge for the cheeks, and that would be made with ground up kermes. Kermes is a red insect, and that's actually how this red was obtained, was from this louse called the kermes louse. It grows on this special oak. It's referred to sometimes as the oak kermes. It grows on a special oak tree in the Mediterranean, and unfortunately the kermes louse, to achieve the best red, it's where the word crimson comes from kermes, crimson, kermes, right? To achieve the best red, you have to harvest the kermes louse female just before she lays her eggs, which means that's going to have a deleterious impact on your kermes population. So, in the Middle Ages, they were hunted almost to extinction, unfortunately. Oh, crap. I've got an eyelash in my eye. Oh, and it's under my contact. Okay, push through, push through. So kermes was also used, it was ground up, and it was used to make a concoction of duck fat and olive oil and some beeswax. And then you would have basically this red concoction that you could then use to add some redness to your lips and also to lightly rouge your cheeks. But it was very delicate. It was very delicate. As for the eyes, eyebrows would be plucked thin. Mine need some attention, apparently. And they would sometimes darken them, you know, you know, now we have eyebrow pencils, but it was nice to have a nice sort of, you know, clean line there. But medieval cosmetics, very understated, no smoky eyes, no eyeshadow, at least not in Western Europe. Yeah, so in Spain is a different, I'm excluding Spain entirely. Spain is always its own thing in the Middle Ages because of the nature of the cultures that were living there, that were inhabiting the Iberian Peninsula. Because you have this wonderful melting pot of Moorish and Arab and Jewish from all parts of, you know, of the world, well, of Jewish populations originate, and of course the European Christians who are basically the descendants of the Visigoths. So yeah, Spain has its own, almost always its own thing. It's not the same way it is in Italy or in Spain or in France or the Low Countries or in England, right? So, but it seems that in general, the aesthetic in Italy and in what is now France, the Low Countries and England was basically the same. Very, very pale skin with a little bit of a light, delicate and understated amount of red on your cheeks, a little bit for your lips, and then maybe outlining of your high arched brows. Right, so that was medieval, which is why when I see a movie set supposedly in the Middle Ages in a historical place involving historically real people, and they have the women with this glam look, with these smoky eyes and this crazy hair, it makes me so angry. Because it is not how medieval noblewomen, any medieval woman, not even, and I know some people, well, what about the courtesans? No, just to know that wasn't what was attractive. That wasn't considered visually appealing. If a woman who was dressed up to go hit a club transported back to 1400, they would think she was mad, insane, or they might think she was some kind of circus performer. But the only place where there was really a circus that did performing was in Constantinople. That wasn't a thing in the rest of medieval Europe. So, yeah. Okay. Can we talk about Iberian makeup and skincare? No, because I don't know anything about it. Sorry, not my area of expertise. I am, what am I? I am the creative Contessa. I'm a living historian, so I'm a practitioner of medieval living history. And as part of medieval living history, I, of course, research medieval material culture and, of course, the history that surrounds it as well. And I guess I am a professional because people pay me to teach them about these things. I am, however, I don't teach at schools. No, I wouldn't want that. The way the school systems work these days, no, thank you. I'm good. Let me see. Okay, so how much do I make? Not much. Not much at all. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so we're going to move on to the sewing party part because I have things I need to accomplish on this dress. So let me show you the pieces so far. First, I'm going to show you this amazing wool. I'm going to try to make sure I catch it in the best light to catch its shine because it actually has this amazing shine to it. See if I bring the light closer and I can maximize the shine, right? So it is just this absolutely silky, look at that. See that? See that? This is wool. This amazing silky shiny fabric is wool. And it feels oh so nice. And normally I would run it across my cheek at this point, but no, not with my freshly applied 12th century sunblock. Right. Okay. So here is actually one of the back pieces as we currently have it cut out. And what it is missing is actually the part on the bottom that is the train, because the way I cut this, it wasn't actually, I cut it with the width of the fabric because the fabric was really wide. Unlike, and even though, yes, medieval wool was called broadcloth, the fine stuff, this is broadcloth. This is broader than medieval broadcloth. So I took in full advantage of the width, which a medieval they wouldn't have done. They would have cut this lengthwise on a medieval fabric that was woven in the Middle Ages. But happily, I didn't have to abide by that. I don't know if you can see, there are indeed white cat furs all over it because all of my cats have white fur in their pelts and they love shedding it everywhere. So I'm just going to go and lay this on the ground. So I'm going to be tilting this downward towards the ground. Okay. So one of the things we're going to have to do is add a piece of fabric onto the bottom. And fabric to make it wide enough isn't 15th century. Dresses like this are no longer really being made geometric style, at least not for the upper classes. They're now being cut with more sophisticated curves and lines. And if they want to make a panel wider, instead of adding perfect triangles onto rectangles, they actually just add pieces to the fabric and then cut one line. And so it's a different way. It's no longer geometric construction, right? And that, so what ends up happening is geometric construction is reserved for the smocks, for the shirts and the undergarments. And then eventually even geometric construction goes away there. By the 19th century, everything is just being made using these tailoring, this style of tailoring, right? So we have this panel, and then I have some of the excess pieces that will, so I'm just going to put these together. These are the two back pieces. So we'll cut this at the draft this time. Tommy, it's okay. I don't know if you all can hear my cat. I don't know why he's meowing. Why is my cat crying? It's always a question, right? So I just have to lay these out. And yes, because of my cat's fur, these will definitely be getting rolled. Now, broadcloth is the term broadcloth. Most modern people hear that and they think of something that's really utilitarian and not very elegant. But broadcloth was the most luxurious wool. And the Florentines who started weaving it, but the quality, super long, staple English wool. And before Florence importing this English wool, their wool wasn't very luxurious. But eventually someone figured out, no doubt a merchant up in London figured out that the wool from the English sheep was particularly long staple. And whoever was the first person to export that wool to England, yeah, they probably made a killing. Because thereafter, there's this trade between England and Florence, this kind of circular trade, where the English send their wool to Florence. Well, they sell it to Florence. Florence weaves it into this amazing broadcloth, and then it gets sent back to England. Or the Flemish weavers were also really good at weaving very fine broadcloth using the English wool. And in fact, there was a colony of Flemish weavers in the 15th century in London who were imported specifically to basically to try to circumvent the whole exporting and re-importing thing, right? Yeah. Lining these up so that they are perfectly aligned. And remember, when you are smoothing out your fabric, you want to try to go with the grain. So the grain is how it's woven, right? So this is with the grain. This would be on the bias, right? You want to smooth it with the grain because if you smooth it on the bias, you will stretch it. But if you smooth it on the grain, it will not stretch. For those of you who are familiar what bias stretch is, yeah. That is where the word bias comes from, by the way, as a skewed view of a situation. It comes from the bias. Okay, so there we go. That is the back panel as it currently is, right? So here is the arm's eye. Here is, this collar still needs to be cut actually. It doesn't have a collar attached yet. Here is the side of the center back side. And then over here, we have the, I just put my skirt in the kitty's water fountain. Oh, well. Here we have the start, actually, the starting curve of the train, right? So that was already cut into place. And I could have sworn that I did in fact cut this train out, the extra panels, but I cannot find them anywhere. I really thought I did that already, but I couldn't even find visual evidence that I'd done it already. So I think I still need to do that, which is what we're about to do today. Thankfully, I have extra pieces, so we can do this. Are any of you working on any sewing today? I know my people in America, many of you are possibly still eating. It being a day of festive feasting in the United States. It's the Thanksgiving celebration that was actually invented. The holiday was invented by, basically was instituted finally by Lincoln, by the way, in the hopes that it would provide some kind of unifying force for the country. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely not Amish. Nope. What is the difference between broadcloth and doeskin? Doeskin is another word for broadcloth. Doeskin is the modern word for broadcloth. We don't call it broadcloth anymore. This is doeskin. This is broadcloth. Doeskin is not a medieval word. That's a modern term. And I don't know when doeskin, when that term came into use, but it's not a medieval word. Okay, so here we have one of the remnants of one of the remnants. So now I have to decide because it's going to be pieced on. So basically, where you see this straight line here, I'm going to be piecing on a small piece that will finish up this train, that will provide the rest of the train. And I don't want a big train. I basically want more of a trail than a train. Now, the thing about trains is you want to make sure that you're actually doing a relatively square curve if you want to have a full train. If you want to have a pointy train, then you just want a really oblique curve. But I don't like pointy trains. I like to have a train that's relatively full at the back. But it should be a curved square, not a square square. Okay, so now I'm going to, I have a couple of things to consider with this fabric. Okay, bringing the camera up. Okay, we talked about how shiny it is, right? Well, it's not shiny in the same way in all directions. It has a grain. It has a direction to the pattern. So to the pattern, by which I mean the light, the way the light falls on it. Now, what we do know is that very often in the few extant garments that have survived from the Middle Ages, the directionality of the pattern is ignored. Right? It's absolutely ignored. So velvet, we have some velvet garments, for instance, velvet ecclesiastical garments, no less, where they have pieced together pieces of this expensive piled, cut pile pattern, velvet, and they have completely ignored the shine, right? So you can actually see that one panel in certain lights looks darker than other panels in other lights, right? So we know that it is absolutely medieval to ignore the direction, the way the light falls on your fabric, and to just maximize its usage. I also plan on doing that in this case because this fabric is so nice and irreplaceable because I literally don't know where else. I've never seen this anywhere else, and certainly not at the price I paid. Doeskin, modernly, broadcloth as was then, usually runs about $150 a meter to start. I paid like $30 per yard for this. So I can't replace it. And I can't replace it as inexpensively as I purchased it, for certain. So that means I want to maximize the use. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, everyone. I have something in my eye. I'm going to step off the camera. I can't believe this. I have an eyelash in my eye. Okay, I'm just going to go here, find something it out. Yes, you will, but that's okay. Okay, saline solution, please work, because this is making me crazy. Whew, there is an eyelash just hiding right under my contact, which is super not great. I apologize, everyone. The pain was getting distracting to the point where I couldn't actually formulate words anymore. Whew, okay. Here's hoping that works. Okay, I think that worked. Oh, okay. I hope that worked. Please don't come back, eyelash. Right, okay, so I will absolutely be maximizing the amount of fabric, or minimizing the amount of fabric I'm using, maximizing the way in which it is used, because I want to have some left over to make something else, because it's that nice. And I would like useful pieces, usefully sized pieces, not little tiny scraps. So when you are laying out your own fabric, keep that in mind. Know if there's a direction to your pattern. Know if there's how it shines differently. So you can see, this is how it shines when it's held like that, right? This is how it shines when it's held like this. And it's also different from side to side, right? So it has a different sheen on one side than it does on the other. So keep that in mind when you're laying out your fabric. If it matters to you, then you'll need to buy more, a lot more, in order for all the pieces to run in the same direction. But that's not the medieval way. The medieval way is for basically to just cut it in a way that you can get the most use out of it. Medieval garments were much less concerned about matching up a pattern. Yep. Let me see, was that too late a period for the pilgrims? Was what too late a period? The fifth, so pilgrim, haha, the pilgrims. If you're talking about the pilgrims, as in, which is ironic because what we call the pilgrims are a bunch of, heretic Puritans, right, who hated the Catholic Church, the prime place where pilgrimage is a regular practice. So yeah, medieval pilgrimage is of course extremely common. Everyone goes on pilgrimage if they can, even if it's just to a local shrine, right? So yes, pilgrimage is a medieval thing. The pilgrims are from the 17th century. And in fact, I'm descended from 2 sets of the original Mayflower pilgrims. I can go visit the people who play them at Plymouth Plantation. Yep. Okay, so let's go ahead and think about how it is I want which of these pieces. I can't believe you cats and your fur. Arrgh! It's okay. I can use a roller to get it off. Okay, so I have one of the pieces I have left is this rather nice large piece. Now, honestly, I would rather conserve this really nice large piece for another project of some kind. Perhaps a nice hood, or a chaperone, as they're sometimes called, or perhaps a golar for myself, a sort of neck piece, sort of like a little capelet actually that women wore just to cover their décolletage when it was cold, because in the 15th century it's getting cold. So I think I'm going to set this piece aside for now. Oh no, it didn't work. Oh, I can't believe it. The kind of stuff that happens when I go live. Okay, I also have this piece. And I actually think this piece is going to be the one I'm going to go with. This was actually one of the offcuts from the side. You can kind of see the curve of the side of the gown right there, from the bodice, the arm's eye to the bodice to the skirt, right? So actually, I think I would ideally like to use this. Now, why I don't care so much about it perhaps reflecting differently on the train is because the train is going to kind of flow together anyway, and there will be ripples. And so the light might not necessarily travel all the way down the sort of folds that will naturally occur in the train. So I'm less concerned about it, especially back there behind me, right? If there were a difference here in the bodice, from this side to this side, I might be slightly more concerned that it's going to shine differently, but I'm really not here. Florentine sleeves for the large broadcloth. No, that would be a waste of them because Florentine sleeves take like half a yard. So I'm probably going to use this piece, and I should have another matching piece like it, which would be ideal. Let's see. Yeah, I think this is pretty similar, or will give me about the right amount anyway. Okay, yeah, so then I have this piece. So I'll go with this piece. So these are all considerations you need to make when you're laying out your fabric in general, when you're deciding which pieces are going to go which way. And also, everyone, if your pattern has not been designed to be cut on the bias, you must make sure that it goes with the grain. If you cut out a garment on the bias using a pattern that was not meant for the bias, you will be very sad at the outcome. It will be terrible. It will either be too tight or too loose. It will stretch in weird ways. It will hang from your body in weird ways. It will warp. So remember, the grain is the direction of weaving, right? So warps go this way, weft goes this way. That's with the grain. If you rotate that 90 degrees, then you have a bias. You're on the bias at that point. And then the diamonds, what is a square on the grain becomes a diamond on the bias. A square will not stretch. There's no stretch. But on the bias, the diamonds that are in between the weave, your threads in the fabric will collapse on themselves and they will stretch weirdly. Right. Now, there are garments in the Middle Ages where that was intentional. Stockings are cut on the bias for men and women. Often we have some examples of them being cut on the grain. Many of them are cut on the bias so that you can achieve that nice stretch around the muscles of your legs, which move a lot, right? So you want a bias stretch. The pattern is designed for that, so that's fine. But dresses are not cut on the bias. There's an exception. There's one exception. It's not mucus. That's the saline solution that ran down my face. There's one exception there to the bias thing. There is a gown. There are extant gowns, plural, well, bodices of gowns from Austria, from the 15th century, from Schloss Lengberg. And they have actually been cut in the most remarkable fashion to take advantage of the bias stretch on purpose. But that's, like I said, it's on purpose. It was designed to take advantage of the bias stretch. Almost all other medieval garments that have survived from the 15th century, not that there are many, they're designed to be cut on the straight grain. So keep that in mind. You don't want to end up sad. Ask me how I know. In the early days of my making dresses, I made that mistake because I was trying to maximize the use of the fabric and minimize the waste. So I just laid the pattern across the bias so I could make sure I would minimize the amount of extra fabric I had to tack on or sew on. And then the garment didn't fit at all. It was a very sad, sad moment for me. Yeah. Oh, Tornado Garden. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to everyone who celebrates. And yeah, if you're enjoying, please like and subscribe, of course. Okay, let me just go back. Right. Okay, so now I have basically made the choice. I'm just going to look at one of these last little remnants I have. Okay, so this remnant is clearly too small for this purpose. Way too small. This remnant is also a little bit too small for the size of train that I want, for the size of trail maybe that I want. Okay, so that means I'm going to be using these two pieces. Okay, so now, next step, to the floor. Sorry, everyone, I'm just going to grab you and move you as gently as I possibly can. Actually, why am I putting myself in the corner when I can move this dress? These pieces. So we call this a Burgundian gown because that was sort of the court that was the most powerful in this era. And that is not what they called them. They did not refer to them as Burgundian gowns. that is what Victorian historians, historians who then eventually became fashion historians called them. So remember I was talking about I don't want to cut this on the bias. So now I am just looking to make sure I don't do that here, that I actually put it more or less on the grain. Okay, so there is the selvage. Okay, let me just put this here. Sorry, this is a bit of an experimental format, but you all asked me yesterday to show you about the about drafting the train. So here we go. Okay, and then for this piece, okay, yeah. So this is the straight edge, right? This is, and you can kind of see that. So that is what I'm going to line up here. Okay, I'm just going to line that up. Okay, put that there. And actually what I'm going to do so that I don't get too angry and frustrated, I think, is I'm going to line this up and make certain that it's enough to actually cut my train out, the train I would like. I think we have to go to about there. And then I'm actually going to whip stitch this on, right? And then I'm going to whip stitch this piece on to the bottom here, and then I will draw my lines and draft them, because that will make that will prevent there from being any issues about this sliding around while I'm marking and cutting. Also, apparently I need to do some ironing, which I hadn't really thought about. I don't know why I didn't think about it, because I'm a big proponent of iron then cut, but this piece is more wrinkly than I was anticipating. Okay, so now I'm just going to lay this piece over top of it to make certain that I have enough on this second piece, because basically the train is going to be, it's going to kind of sort of come here, is more or less. And this angle is just going to continue until the point where I want the train to end, right? So this is basically more or less what we're talking about. So now I'm going to lay this second piece on to make sure it's in fact big enough to do what it is I want to do, and it might not be, in which case we'll readjust our plan, or it might be. So again, I want to make certain that as much as possible, I am not going across the bias. And I am going, unfortunately with this one, with this piece, because it was a fold over piece. So that means that both of these lines, both of these straight lines that you see here, they're both on the bias. So I have an unfortunate choice here. That means if I want this to attach not on the bias, then I'm basically lose, because that's no longer on the bias. I lose half of it, right? And that is shorter than I think I want my trail to be, right? I think that is unfortunately less full than I want it to be. But maybe not. I also have another, there's also an opportunity here, actually. So we can recalibrate. Yeah, so maybe actually, bring the camera up to me. Maybe actually I only want a little short trail on the back, right? Remember I talked about this being my practical garment, so maybe I don't actually need, hashtag unbiased, nice, love it. So maybe I actually don't need it to be that huge, in which case I can maximize this by just using just this piece folded in half, giving me about a 10-inch, 12-inch trail, right? And that's not how far behind me it will actually train. That's just how much further it would be if it was standing straight on the ground. That'll give me kind of a nice, elegant sweep without it being overly obnoxious. I realize you can't see the ground, so why am I doing that? Without it being overly obnoxious, right? So I'm actually, now that I'm thinking about this, kind of leaning towards using just this one little piece for the whole train, for both pieces of the back, because it's folded over, right? And I can stand back from the camera. It's folded over. And so that will give me, like I said, about 10 to 12 inches of a trail. And then that means I can save kitty fur. That means I can save this meteor piece, not meteor, this meteor piece for combining with these other spare pieces into making another garment, maybe even a Burgundian style doublet, pourpoint for the condottiero, perhaps. So we could have matching, for instance. Or maybe I could make him, there might even be enough to make one of the fitted versions of French overgarments from this era. There's definitely not enough to make anything Italian. Everything Italian from the 15th century involves more fabric than that when it comes to an overlayer for the men. I don't think I could get even a zubo out of it, actually. Yeah. So that's actually what I am now thinking. I am thinking that that is what I would like to do. That I would like to use just this piece folded in half to provide me with both pieces of my so-called train. Yeah. Okay, questions? What am I making? Yes, I am making, we are working on, so right now I'm actually only dressed in the bottom 2 layers in which I should be dressed if I were going outside in public. So I'm actually making the gown, as it's called in 15th century English, that would go over top of this kirtle. And it's made of this blue wool, wow, this black wool. I'll show you one of the front pieces. This is one of the front pieces. Oh, and actually I've got you on mic, so I can actually walk over to the closet and show you the fancy version, right? So sort of this is basically what the front panel will look like. But let me show you the fancy version of the gown. If you've watched my getting dressed video, my Burgundian getting dressed video, then you have. But if you have, wait, did they not get put away? Okay, here we go. Okay, this is the fancy version. So here's the fancy version of the gown, or called a robe, R-O-B-E in French, right? Okay, this is the fancy version. Don't judge, it's been folded up. Okay, so it's worn over top of this with a panel over top of the lacing, and it has, I'm too short to show you the train. It has a very long train, right? So that's the train, not as much as it trails when I walk. When I walk, it trails out much further behind me, right? So this is called a gown. In modern terms, people call this a Burgundian gown because that's kind of that was the court that was most powerful in this era and most influential across Europe. And so historians in the 19th century started calling this style of gown the Burgundian gown, even though it was a style worn in France, even though it's a style that you see also English noble women wearing. So if you ever look up Burgundian gown, this is the Margaret of York style of Burgundian gown that's nice and fitted, not big and bulky, right? So basically, I'm making a simpler version of this. And yeah, look at the way the light really catches the shine on that. By the way, this dress, this gown, has a really tragic origin story. So it's entirely hand sewn. Every single seam, every single stitch, every layer, and it's got 3 layers, is hand sewn. Well, this one is, yeah, it's got 3 layers. It's hand sewn, right? So I made it in 2013. I wore it to its very first event, a ball, a dance event. And there was a feast at the ball. And I was sitting at the table, and this server, who had no idea how to properly serve, came out with a bowl, a giant bowl, with a turkey in it, because these were recipes actually from a 16th century cookbook called Scappi, and he actually has a recipe for turkey, as you all know turkey. And the bowl was filled with juice, and the juice was sloshing, and the juice was filled with turkey grease. And he actually goes to serve this bowl over my lap as I'm sitting in my chair with my lap exposed. And as I utter the words, "Don't serve that over top of me," the bowl tips and turkey grease just goes all the way down the front of the dress from my waist all the way to the hem. And because this is 3 layers, all 3 layers absorb all of that turkey grease. First time ever wearing the dress, ever. And it ends up covered in turkey grease. You can imagine I was a little upset after spending 150 hours making the dress. We took it to the cleaners. Unfortunately, they did not do what they should have done. They did not stain treat it. Instead, they ran it through their dry cleaning machine again and again and again and again to get out the stain, and it trashed the silk. So this used to be, I know it looks shiny and nice in this light. It used to be even more shiny, and it used to be much sturdier. So yeah, this poor thing, that it's lasted as long as it has, is kind of amazing because its origin story is tragic. Yeah. Right. Okay, so this is basically, we are making a simpler version of this. It will have, just like this dress, it will have a turn back collar. Let me just do the, right. It will have a turn back collar like this dress. It will be nice and fitted like this dress. And the skirts will just be not quite as full and not quite as long. Yep. Yeah, it was a sad story for the dress. So that's what we're working on today. And right now we're working on drafting the little train that's going to be added on. Okay, so let's move this back. And then I can be more in the camera to do this work. Okay. Trying to decide the best angle for you all to see what it is I'm actually doing. Okay, so I've decided, I'm pretty certain that we're going to be working with just this piece, and I'm going to have just a modest sort of trail on it. Now, unfortunately, it's been so long since I started working on this that I don't remember, because I started this back in September and there was a really long break on it, that I don't remember how long this side seam is, but I'll just go ahead and show you. I'm pretty certain this side seam here, this is the side seam. So this part that will be on the center side of my body, right? I'm pretty certain that that literally goes just to the floor. I'm going to make certain that's true by comparing it against the front piece. I'm going to lay the front piece out. So this is what happens when you don't work on a project all at once and you take long breaks in your project. You end up forgetting where the hell you were. Now, I actually went back and watched my video on this dress to see where it was I left off. How funny is that? I actually had to rely on my own vlog to track my progress on this thing. Okay, yeah, so that goes basically to the floor. Great. Okay, now sometimes you can actually, on this dress, for instance, this gown, this has a super full train, super full, like wedding full, modern wedding dress full, which is very authentic, by the way. And by that I mean the side seam, where it hits the, wow, I need to wash this. This is filthy. Where this hits the ground, this doesn't hit the ground on the side seam. It's longer than the ground. So that actually means that the train starts basically where my feet are when I'm walking forward. So that means that dancing is a little more complicated because I have to do a lot more skirt management because people who are standing next to me have a tendency to step on my dress because it's actually long on the sides as well. I decided that this time I did not want that on this black dress. So on this black dress on the side, it goes only to the ground and the train doesn't start until the back side. the sort of behind the center seam. Whereas in this one, the train actually starts in front of the center seam. So that's another thing you're going to have to take into consideration when you're drafting your trains. How full do you want it? If you want it to be full, then the train is actually going to have to start in the front panel, not in the back panel, which is what happened here. So, and it's great. This is fantastic. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's just that when dancing dances with lateral motion, like the Italian dances in the 15th century do, it gets a bit annoying. It's not quite as graceful as dresses without that super full train have. Which actually just goes to show that certain styles of dance were intended for certain styles of fashion. If you look at what women were wearing in the 15th century in the Italies, and then you look at the dances they were doing, you can see, oh yeah, the clothes really line up with that style of motion. If you look at the dances that come from Burgundy and France in this era, you can see, yeah, the way they're moving actually makes sense for the clothing. Right? And that's why I hate dancing English country dances in my 15th century Burgundian clothing. Hate it. I hates it. I do. Because 17th century English country dances, not designed for this kind of clothing whatsoever. And I feel like a flopping duck when I'm dancing those in these clothes. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Any questions? Any valid questions? I do accept teasing questions. I don't accept rude questions. You will be banned if you make a rude question, just saying. If you're enjoying this presentation, then please do hit that like button and remember to subscribe, everyone. Okay, so moving on. The nice thing about this dress, though, it's only silk, and the silk actually packs down pretty small. See, big giant dress packs into a relatively small bundle. Okay, question. But that's more reparable than spilling greasy liquid. Yeah, absolutely. I can fix rips. In fact, I have fixed rips. Let me show you one of the rips I have fixed caused by dancing. It wasn't a fun repair, but it was a repair. So this dress also has a tragic story. This kirtle, this backlacing kirtle, backlacing kirtles aren't a thing. I made it before I knew that was true, but this one has a train, and I was dancing a bouncy 15th century Italian dance in it, and I went to dance away with the sequence of steps with which I should have been dancing, nice and bouncy like this, and there was a man standing on my train, and he didn't know it. Well, I danced away, and he didn't, because he wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing, and it caused the sides of the dress to shred, to absolutely shred apart. See, look, all the way through the back, shredded. And so I literally had to darn it back together. Thankfully, it was lined, and the lining didn't rip. Only the wool on the outside ripped. So I was able to basically reweave the fabric back together with needle and thread onto the lining. But I had to do that all through here. I had to do it here. I had to do it on this side, right? So yeah, you can repair tears, but oh boy, some kinds of tears, dancing injuries for clothes tend to be shreds, not rips. So yeah. Okay, right. Back to drafting this garment. Oh God, you would never know. You would never know that we actually swept in here extensively, and I meant to put my belt on. What did I do with my belt? I brought out my belt specifically because I wanted to put it on so that I would not be training my train around and kicking up all kinds of more cat fur. There it is, and putting it on the dress the way I have been. Kitties! I swear I'm going to dress my cats in sweaters, and then I will change the sweaters once a day, and the sweaters will catch a large amount of the fur, preventing this from being a problem. I'm just going to tuck this train up so that hopefully, no, I'm going to kirtle it. where I'm going to kilt my dress. Okay, so those of you who think that Scottish kilts are a medieval thing, they're not. This, what I'm doing right now, is called kilting. It's a 14th century English word, not a Scots word. And kilting literally means to draw up your tunic or dress through your belt in this manner so that it is no longer on the ground. Men and women did this as a matter of practicality. This is kilting. This is a kilt. What you see me in now is kilted. Okay, well, unfortunately, this thing is covered in cat fur now. I don't know if you can see it or not. Yeah, probably you can't actually see the cat fur. Oh, well. Okay. Okay, yeah. This is my complete 15th century noblewoman cosplaying a peasant look. You're welcome. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on with this. So because I've decided that this is how we're going to proceed, I'm going to get my straight line and make certain that I actually have enough of this fabric piece that I would like to use to actually keep going. Okay. So T-square, always have a T-square. All right, so I'm going to line this up with the angle of this, the dress, the skirt, the back seam of the dress as is. And what I want to make certain is that for the length that I would like to make this train, I actually have enough on this side, right? Don't make the mistake of tacking a piece on there, because you'll notice the angle of the dress, no fabric there. So I'm just going to line that up with that straight line to make certain that I have enough. Okay, so here's the thing about curves and curving your trying to figure out the best angle, everyone. Curving your skirts. Okay, so the curve is actually going to come like this, right? So it's going to come down a little bit here, and then it's going to sweep up. And what I can see already, actually, is that we've got a bit of a problem on this end of the piece of fabric that I'm looking to add on. Right, because I already cut this sweep over here. Right, I cut this curve here originally. And apparently I had a piece of fabric in mind to add on here, and I must have completely manufactured a memory of already doing this. I really, really do remember cutting pieces to actually attach to here. And either it demonstrates the plasticity of memory, or it sadly means that I have lost two very nice pieces of wool somewhere in the last 2 months. It could go either way, honestly. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is, so here, so where I've just placed this actually lines up with where my hip actually comes out in my skirt. So this is basically the point at which this is just going to fall straight to the ground, because that's where my hips end. And so the skirt will basically fall more or less straight down from there, right? And that matters because that is actually where the point at which I want my train to kind of more or less be at its most full, because that's kind of the piece behind me that's how it's going to trail behind me. Right, okay, so a couple of thoughts here. Do I have actually enough to continue this sweep? Let me grab my tape, my measuring tape. By the way, measuring tape, if you can find super long measuring tape, I highly recommend it. This one measures up to 120 inches, I think. Yeah, so this one measures up to 6 yards. Right. If you can find a 6-yard measuring tape, do get one. Your average measuring tape is much, much shorter than this. But if you're doing medieval garments that involve long skirts and trains, you really do want that 6. You really want to have a 6-yard measuring tape. You just do. It's or 4, sorry, 120, 4-yard measuring tape. Trust me, it'll make your life a lot easier. Yeah, angle of the dangle. That's correct. Yep, that's what I would call it. Yes, you got me to say it aloud. There it is. The angle of the dangle. Yep. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just make certain that, yeah, happily, I don't actually need to add much on to get the kind of train that I'm wanting because it's already so much longer here in the back. So let me give you an example. The side seam for me, from my waist to the ground, is about 43 inches. Don't judge, I've got short legs. Right? And the current length from my waist, the waist on my back, to the bottom is already 49 inches. So it's already quite a bit longer, actually. It's already quite a bit longer in the back. It's already 6 inches longer in the back than it is on the side. So I already have a 6-inch trail, right? Yeah, sorry, I told you guys we'd be working through this together because I haven't picked this project up seriously since the last week of September, the second to last week of September. So yeah, so it's already 6 inches longer than the side seam is. So I already have a 6-inch trail in the back, more or less, in essence. So adding on this piece means that it's going to bring it up to, you know, about 16 inches as a trail, more or less, which is perfect. That's what I want. I just want enough to create that elegant drape when I walk, but I don't want enough for it to become fussy in my life. Yeah. So that's what we're working with. Let me see. Okay. Okay. Yes, I've got short legs. We all know I have short legs. Okay. 43 inches is not very long. So now I am looking at the curve that I currently have. Let me see if I can. Let me see. Who looks like a 1200 century housewife. What you think of as a housewife didn't exist in the Middle Ages. Yeah. Housewives, women who, that was pretty much all women. They were in charge of managing their household, and they were basically like CEOs of a multi-level enterprise, right? Nothing like you would imagine it today. Medieval women, medieval housewives had to handle accounting. They had to manage all of their staff, and they had a lot of staff. They had to make sure that they could check the books. They had to be able to read and write and approve orders and make sure that all the shopping lists were correct and that all the stores were full of all the foodstuffs they would need, that all the different things were taken care of. They had to manage the butlery, they had to manage the pantler, they had to manage the kitchens, right? Medieval housewifing was a full-time job plus some. So yeah, it was more like managing a multi-level enterprise would be now, medieval housewifing was, because there were no appliances, so everything had to be done by people who you hired and who you had to track and pay and maybe hire full-time or maybe contract out. Yeah, very different situation. Yep. Okay. So I've got a piece of chalk here. This is called tailor's chalk or tailor's soap. This is actually soap. It's not chalk at all, it's soap. The nice thing about tailor's soap is that it leaves a nice mark, but it washes away with just a little bit of water and not much effort. And of course, I don't really care because I'm going to be using it to mark the bottom sweep of the train. So it's going to get cut anyway. So it will be cut away. Okay, let me see. Is it true that they didn't have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches back then? Yes, absolutely. No peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. No peanut butter in medieval Europe because peanuts are not European. Peanuts come from the Pacific, the Pacific Islands, no less. So yeah, they didn't have peanuts and they didn't have peanut butter. They had almond butter, but it was nothing like our almond butter. They had literally almond milk that was congealed to be like butter so that you can then spread it on Lenten days when you weren't supposed to be eating animal products at all, not even butter. And jelly, they didn't have jelly. They didn't, fruit, to have jelly, you have to have fruit that you're not going to use for other things. By the 16th century, we start seeing preserves, like modern people would understand fruit preserves, right? With the whole fruit preserved in a lot of sugar. Now, whether that was spread on bread or not so much. Yeah. I think applying conserves, preserves, and whatnot to bread is more of a 17th century and forward thing. It's not a medieval practice. No, they did not. Sorry. Sandwiches. Sandwiches aren't really attested, but you know, and the thing is, to have a sandwich, you have to have the kind of ingredients that would easily go on a sandwich, meaning like thinly sliced cooked meats. And that doesn't seem to be much of a medieval thing, because if you look at medieval books of etiquette that talk about how to carve things for serving, they're not carved in thin slices. They didn't have forks. They didn't eat with forks in Western Europe. So pieces had to be cut so that they could be bite size, basically, so that they could just be popped in your mouth with your fingers. So, you know, those aren't the conditions for a sandwich to actually work. Yeah. So, and you know, you didn't generally just have lying around large leftovers of roast, for instance. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, also no refined sugar, or yes, they had refined sugar, but sugar up until the end of the 15th century was crazy expensive, and it was imported all the way from Indonesia and India. So it was a very expensive import, and it was very rarely used. It was used more like salt is, right? It was used in the same way that salt is, as a little bit of a flavor enhancer, not as a bulk giving ingredient. The 15th century, that starts to change a little bit, but by the 16th century, after the white gold that was the sugar plantations in Madeira and the Açores, right, the Portuguese colonies, right? Once the sugar started really growing in earnest on their sugar plantations there, and it started getting imported to Europe, it was way cheaper. So it flooded Europe with this much cheaper sugar. Then the Europeans started eating sugar like it was, you know, the last thing that would keep them alive. And then their teeth started rotting, and then diabetes skyrocketed, and then we actually finally start seeing truly obese people in quantities, whereas in the Middle Ages, obesity is almost non-existent, to the point where an actually obese person would be a freak at a carnival exhibit, right? So yeah, medieval food, much healthier than modern food, especially for the peasants. The wealthy people were still eating stuff they really shouldn't have been. Large quantities of meat, which leads to gout, right? Not lots of vegetables, but the peasants and the people on the lower end of the servants, people on the lower socioeconomic end of the spectrum, are actually eating pottages, which are stews made of whatever vegetables and herbs happen to be in season, with just a little bit of meat. So they're actually getting much more nutritious food. They're also eating bread made out of bean flour pulses. So they're making, you know, out of fava bean flour, out of chickpea flour, out of lentil flour, out of whole grain flour, rye, not the refined white wheat flour, right? But the wealthy are eating bread made out of refined, super refined white flour with not a single nutritional value to it, just pure calories. So they're eating that bread and they're eating all this meat. So actually, it's the people at the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum who are actually getting more nutrition in the Middle Ages. How crazy is that? Yeah. Okay, so Now we're going to get to the actual drafting part for basically marking the curve of this. And, some of you are going to ask me, well, how do you know how the curve should look? I just do. If you spend enough time looking at various skirts and dresses and historical patterns as laid out, eventually you just develop an eye for the geometry of the skirt. Now, there is actually, no doubt, a properly specific geometry out there that actually tells you if you want to train this long and you want it to be this full, then it needs to be have an angle of such and such degrees, get it, you get into some real trigonometry kind of stuff. I'm just like with cooking, I'm more of a sew by instinct person and a pattern by instinct person. So I'm just going to apologize for that right now. I actually started thinking, since you all requested this yesterday, I started thinking really hard about how to intellectualize a skirt train, and I'm going to give it some more thought, and I'll probably come up with some kind of geometry for it, because I actually do think in terms of geometry and geometric formulae. So stay tuned for a post where I try to give you more explanation about how the geometry of a train works at a mathematical level. Because there are some people who sew and pattern based on feel, and there are some people who like to have formulae and can only work with formulae and draft with very specific measurements and these formulae. I kind of fall somewhere in between. I can do both. So yeah, there it is. Okay, so let's go ahead and, oh wait, I missed a comment. Hold on a minute. If medieval women didn't want to be the CEO of a house, they went into the forest and cast some spells. Well, actually, in the Middle Ages, men were as often as not to be practitioners of magic, i.e. wizards, as women were. Bet you didn't know that. Yeah, actually, if a woman didn't want to be the CEO of her own house, then she joined a convent, is what she was much more likely to do in the Middle Ages. Because if you're at the socioeconomic level that you are going to be the CEO of your own household, right? If you're at that level of society, you can afford to join a convent. Because actually joining a convent was not free. You had to actually come with a trousseau, especially by the 15th century. You had to come with basically enough supplies so that you weren't an economic burden on the convent, that you were contributing to the convent and not just taking from the convent by becoming part of the community. Yeah, also a little known fact. In the first millennium, it's completely different. There's a whole different supply and demand when it comes to women in the first millennium. But by the 15th century, women who joined a convent as full-time cloistered nuns especially, they were mostly from the upper echelons of society. There were lay sisters who came from the lower echelons of society, and they did a lot of the actual labor of the convent, like the gardening and the weaving and the daily sort of household stuff. So yeah, honestly, for women, it's kind of either be the CEO of your own household, or be a servant in a household, or join a convent and be a CEO, upper management of the convent, or be a servant in the convent. Like those are kind of the choices. And of course, we had women, many women who were craftswomen, right? They were professionals. Silk women. There were certain professions that were very disproportionately women, even in the Middle Ages. Silk women, so women who wove narrow wares, who made laces like the kinds for dresses, and for men's pourpoint, for their doublets, for their armor. Right, trim, narrow wares woven, tablet woven, or inkle loom woven, although I don't know whether inkle looms are medieval or not actually, but tablet woven. Women also did embroidery, and they did a lot of the hand sewing they did a lot of the sewing of the garments. The tailor would do what I'm doing now. He would take the measurements, he would draft and cut the garments, and then the seamstresses would be the ones who would actually do the seams and do the actual sewing often. There were seamers, however, men who also did that. But yeah, there were a lot more women. Women in the Middle Ages were working women. They all were. They all had jobs of some kind. There was this idea of the housewife who just sits at home and does some delicate embroidery, a much later development, and only a small subset of a very specific level of society in the 19th century had that luxury, right? But in the Middle Ages, women across the strata, they're all working in some way, whether it's intellectual work or prayer or a craft or management. right? Everyone is working. There are no housewives who just sit at home and do nothing in the Middle Ages. There's a couple of exceptions you find in stories, but those stories are funny and sensational because it's unusual. Yeah. Okay. Just another reminder to like and subscribe if you're enjoying watching me hold forth randomly about medieval material culture while I try to actually finish cutting this damn thing. Okay, how did medieval women know who to trust and natural homeopathic herbs so they wouldn't be accused of witchcraft? It's a myth that women ran a risk of being accused of witchcraft in the Middle Ages. That is a Reformation, post-Reformation development. In the Middle Ages, it was just, women and men knew the use of herbs for medical purposes, and it was accepted, and no one questioned it. The very few times that we have witch trials in the Middle Ages, it's usually men who are on trial and men who get convicted, and it's nearly always for political purposes. So the Knights Templar, for instance, the leaders of the Knights Templar were convicted of witchcraft and burned, by the way. But that was part of the big political ploy to get access to their wealth. And it might have been heresy, but for certain, they were tried as witches, right? And then in the early 15th century, the Duchess of Gloucester is accused of practicing magic against Henry VI, the King of England, not practicing magic, but specifically using it to harm the king. That's the deal, right? That's the problem. It's not that she was practicing magic, it's that she was practicing magic to harm the king. And her two co-conspirators are men, her alleged co-conspirators are men. They're convicted and they're burned for witchcraft. She is not. So this idea of the wise woman who could risk, being mistaken for a witch, it's not a medieval thing. In the Middle Ages, there is still a very close bond between practicing magic and Christianity. We have books of magic from the Middle Ages, many of them, in fact, and all of them contain spells and incantations that call on the saints and Jesus for the power behind the spell. So this isn't a question of, it's not black magic. It's at the end of the 15th century that we start seeing that kind of talk. And then there's the Hammer of Witches that's published in like the 1480s by the Pope, right? That's when we start seeing the real problems coming about. But that's beyond, really, that's kind of, 1480 is kind of getting beyond my period of interest, because that's getting into the modern era, and that's kind of the last gasp of chivalry. So yeah. But in general, women are just not, they don't face those kind of consequences because herbs were used for everything. That was the medicine. And we have huge health manuals that talk about all kinds of concoctions to make and heal people, right? And a lot of the spell books don't use herbs at all, or they use very few, right? They use more objects and drawings and prayers and incantations. Yeah. And yeah, so it's there just isn't this, again, in the Middle Ages, the comment is you can be mistaken for a witch for just living your life alone. No, you couldn't. You really couldn't. You wouldn't be. There's no evidence of that. Show me the evidence of a woman being tried for witchcraft in the Middle Ages because she was living alone. That's a modern myth, another modern myth about the Middle Ages that is just incorrect. There's no evidence of that. I've never seen evidence of that. Hermits were a thing, right? Hermits were a thing. But here's the reality about living your life alone. It's almost impossible in the Middle Ages. The only reason that hermits could live that way is because people brought them food. When you live in a pre-modern society, when you don't have machinery and appliances and you don't have electricity, to survive on your own is almost impossible because of the amount of work it would take, right? It's not as easy as everyone thinks it is. And I know Hollywood loves to portray, the wise woman alone. No, no. And there's just no evidence of that. Yeah. Were the Salem witch trials that occurred also for political reasons? Oh, the Salem witch trials, it's a whole different ball of wax. That's not the Middle Ages, guys. Middle Ages is basically, in my opinion, ends with the Reformation. That's where I draw the line for the Middle Ages, right? Salem witch trials in the 1690s, by the way, end of the 17th century, are not political. That's just That's hysteria driven by religious nut jobs. Okay, I'm a descendant of the Pilgrims, so I can talk about them this way. They were whack jobs, and they basically set up America to be in the mess it is now because of the garbage they were preaching and the things they believed and the beliefs they taught, right? That's the reason that we moralize poverty in the United States. Thank you, Puritans, for moralizing poverty. And so if you're rich, it's because you deserve to be. If it's poor, you because you deserve to be. Right now, those are Puritans. Those are Congregationalists in the end of the 17th century, not political. That's religious insanity. And actually, the preponderance of the witch trials happened in the 17th century, well past the Middle Ages, which is what frustrates me even more when people talk about medieval witch trials. They're just not common. They happen very, very rarely. And usually it's in response to a crime that has actually been committed. Like, for instance, a woman kills her baby, right? Yeah, no, the real witch hunt hysteria is in the 17th century. It starts at the end of the 16th, and it is directly a consequence of the Reformation. Most witches are burned or hanged by Protestant churches, not the Catholic Church. Sorry. And in part, there's a theory, and it's a pretty plausible one, that the witch hunting hysteria starts because of the famine and plague that results from the disaster that is the 30 Years' War, about which almost no one ever learns or hears, especially not in the United States, because we don't really learn history in the United States, right? So the 30 Years' War creates this massive famine that leads to crops rotting in the fields because everyone's dead and can't go actually harvest them. And so the grain rots, it gets ergot poisoning, right? Or it develops ergot, this fungus that grows on it. And then people eat the rye, make it into bread, and eat it anyway. And so they get ergot poisoning, and then they start hallucinating. So that's one of the theories about why in the 17th century witch hunting becomes such a big thing. But that's beyond my period of interest, technically. I know about it because I lived in Germany for 12 years, and I've always learned the histories of the places where I live. But yeah. Yeah, Vonnegut. Yeah, Kurt Vonnegut. Let me see. Vonnegut had a quote in one of his novels about America being the only culture without any folklore, about poor people being smart and wise. I think the Puritans are why. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, so the other reason, I mean, we do have folklore though. I mean, we've got some folk heroes, right? You think about it, maybe you've forgotten about them, but yeah. Okay. Oh, hello from Kurdistan. Well, wow. Welcome. Hello from Daegu, South Korea, where I currently am. Yeah, good morning. You have a lot of historical knowledge. I love learning about history. Yeah, I love learning about history too. For me, history is just a series of really fascinating stories, right? And that's why I love it, because it's better than fiction in most cases. Okay, I'm going to focus now on sewing. This is my medieval sewing party. I need to get sewing done. Okay, so here I am working on this train, and I'm going to mark it out. So I'm just going to double check now. I think you can see me. That, in fact, the sweep I want, I can achieve all the way across. Stupid neckline. Okay, here we go. Let me see if I can actually get this. Trying to decide what the best angle for this is for you all. Maybe back here, and you can see more of the working process. Yeah, I think that's probably better. Sorry, this is a bit of an experiment, everyone. Thank you for going along with me on the experiment. For those just joining, welcome to Medieval Sewing Party with the creative Contessa. I'm the Contessa, and I am working on a new 15th century gown called a Burgundian gown in modern costuming circles. It would have just been called a gown in the 15th century in English, or a robe in French. And I'm now just working on adding a piece on. That's what this is, adding a piece on so that it can have a nice little cute trail train in the back. So you always measure thrice and cut mark once, measure again, mark again as necessary, and then cut once. Get stingy on your measuring and on your checking your work, because it's easier to remark than it is to recut and have to sew extra pieces on, etc. Okay, so I think, all right, so and also remember that you can always trim away. It's easier to trim away than it is to add on. Now, that being said, I don't believe in giving yourself tons of extra so that you waste fabric, because I have a very medieval attitude when it comes to fabric usage. And the medieval attitude was fabric is crazy. You should minimize the waste and maximize the use. And in fact, one of the uses for the little scraps that could result from cutting is they would actually take those scraps and they would use them as stuffed mattresses. We know that from the inventory of Lorenzo de' Medici, where it inventories every single thing that is in his palazzo when he dies in 1492. And it goes into the details of every single mattress in every single room. And it talks about the stuffings in the mattress. And in one of the mattresses, it's stuffed with linen scraps, and another mattress is stuffed with wool scraps. How fun is that? So keep your scraps, and then you can make yourself a medieval mattress if you are doing medieval living history and want an authentic mattress in your encampment, for instance. Okay, so actually, this definitely looks like it will be plenty of fabric for my purposes. That's kind of what I'm doing here, marking this out. And so the next thing I'm going to do then is, in fact, I'm going to split this piece, because right now it's actually on a fold. And I want that fold gone. So I'm going to actually split it into two pieces down the center. And I'm actually going to take advantage of, I could try to split it down the center by ripping it along the grain. That might not give me the pieces I want, though, depending on how actual straight the weave is. So some of you have maybe done the method where you trim the edge and then you just rip, right? That can work. It can also give you an uneven cut depending on if the fabric was not woven to be perfectly straight, if the weft and the warp did not actually end up as perpendicular as they should. Ask me how I know. So now I have to make the hard choice of whether I just want to mark a line and cut down it, or if I want to be lazy and just tear down the center. I'm really feeling kind of lazy. And also I want this to finally be done. So I might do the thing I would never recommend anyone else do and just cut at the center here and tear down to see if I get a nice perfect straight edge. This wool actually tears pretty nicely. So I should get something that's pretty neat and straight, and possibly, if I'm lucky, more neat and more straight than if I actually cut it with scissors, or my sewing shears specifically. Yeah, okay. Here are my sewing shears. Well, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to go ahead and cut it and tear, and we'll see what happens. YOLO, man, YOLO. So I'll do this maybe up close so you can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so question. I hope you visit Kurdistan and see more traditions and culture in Kurdistan. I am an avid traveler. Actually, I travel quite a lot. I have a whole travel channel. If you want to go with me on my travels, I have a channel called Travels with the Creative Contessa. And yeah, I love to travel. I love to travel to different and non-touristed locations and experience especially experience local traditions and culture and history firsthand. And Kurdistan is certainly on the list of places to do that. However, I was under the impression that it's not necessarily so safe to actually travel to Kurdistan right now. But maybe I'm mistaken because, you know, we're not necessarily getting the most accurate news. Okay, so yeah, what happened, what I thought might happen, did in fact happen, although what it shows is that I didn't cut it as straight. So I do have a really lovely, nice straight line, but the second piece is now significantly smaller than the first piece, than the other side, because the straight line that was actually down this, but that's okay because I didn't want it to be on the bias anyway. So now we have to see if the piece I have left is actually big enough to create the kind of train I want or not, to create the trail I want or not. Yeah, it definitely is not. Okay, well, that was failed. That was a failed experiment. But on the other hand, this, I would have wanted it to be straight in any case. So now I have one piece that will work for my trail, and now I have to dig into my stash over here for a second piece that could work. And that will be this one, I guess. So I've got this. This might work. Let's see. Okay, putting it on the ground. Okay. I'm going to place it on the ground, line it up with the panel and see if I think it will actually give me the amount of fabric I need to continue the trail. Okay. Okay, well, it's got enough there. And it looks like it has enough there. Okay, so that piece works. Let's see about this piece. Right. So, you know, the thing about us, those of us who explore medieval material culture, is that, you know, all of these sorts of arts, tailors knew exactly how the patterns were supposed to work. They knew how to lay everything out. They knew how to measure everything. They knew how to cut. When it comes to 15th century tailors, we don't have any manuals that have survived. So all of that art, this knowledge, those skills, they died. They went away. No one recorded them. So we're often forced as practitioners of medieval living history, as fashion historians looking to recreate these garments, we are often forced to reinvent the wheel. Whereas, you know, for a medieval tailor, this would have just gone super fast. There would have been no questions. He would have known exactly how to lay out the fabric because the fabric is more or less a standard width. He would have known the shape of all the pieces. He would have known the right kind of measurements to take, right? So we as modern people are often forced to, completely reinvent a lost art. Now, by the 16th century, you start actually getting tailoring manuals that actually describe things in detail. I'm thinking Alcega in Spain, for instance, the Barra method of measurement, right? But unfortunately, we don't have an equivalent source for any century before the 16th century. It would be great if someone discovered a tailoring manual from the 15th century. I mean, I will say, on the other hand, there is a certain joy in the hunt, in the figuring things out, in discovering the way things were by trial and error, by logic, by by discovery, right? There's a certain thing I love about that. It's, the closer to the modern era you get, the less mystery there is, the less there is to discover about the way things were done. And for me, there certainly is a certain amount of joy in the hunt, shall we say. Absolutely. And the joy and the creativity of figuring things out rather than just being presented it on a platter. Right? I definitely do enjoy that aspect of medieval living history. And that might be why the 16th century doesn't appeal to me so much, because we have so many garments from the 16th century that have survived. We have tailoring manuals from the 16th century. There is so much information about the way dances were done in the 16th century, about how music was played in the 16th century, that there's no mystery, right? There's no excitement. It's all known and it's all explored and it's all done, and everyone does it the same way because the information is that clearly available from the 16th century, whereas that's not true of the centuries that predate the 16th century. So yeah, that might be why I lose interest as of the 16th century, more or less. Also, the Reformation, ugliest times in the history of Europe. It really is. For the wars of religion, the way all of the charitable institutions are closed down, princes go and literally rob the monasteries, and instead of there being charitable institutions to provide jobs and training and housing and food for poor people, that all goes away, and so poverty skyrockets in Europe. That's an ugly time. Okay, so I have just enough to actually train the way I would like to. Just enough by skirting right along that edge. Skirting along that edge. Ha ha ha. Ugh, my stupid brain. Okay, so what that means is, what I'm going to do now actually is I'm going to try to remove some of the cat hair that's on this, and I'm going to iron these panels, and then I'm going to whip stitch each of these pieces of fabric onto the bottom of the respective panels, and then I will mark and cut them so that there's no question of pieces moving. So what do I mean by whip stitch them on? Stupid cats. Okay. So, okay. So what do I mean by whip stitch it on? So I've got this edge here, right? And I've got an edge here, and I'm going to put these together, and I'm just going to put them face to face, and I'm just going to take my needle and thread, and I'm just going to literally whipping the stitches all the way around, and then it will open up and it will lay flat. And I can get away with that because this is wool, and wool, and it's doeskin, it's broadcloth, and so it doesn't ravel. You'll notice that this is a cut edge. Did you realize this was a cut edge? You'll notice there's no loose threads, right? So I can get away with that with this kind of wool. If this were silk, I would have to do a different kind of joining seam, but that's the beauty of wool. You don't actually need to finish of doeskin wool, of broadcloth. You don't need to finish the edges because the wool is fulled. And what that means, it's been tromped on. Well, it's been coated in fermented urine and then tromped on or run through hammers that are driven by water, a hammer mill, literally, until the gaps between the warp and the weft shrink together completely, and you can no longer actually see the weave of the wool. That's what makes it shiny, right? Because the weave is gone, basically. It's completely merged into itself, and that's what makes it this beautiful silky shine that you see here. Right? That gives it this silky sheen that you see here. So I'm going to whip stitch those pieces on, and then I will lay them out once it's whip stitched, and I will actually cut them properly then. So for that, I'm going to need to do a couple of things. I'm going to have to decide whether I want to iron it or not. Okay, so I think I'm going to go ahead and sit down then and go ahead and whip stitch this. So let me just reset, give this a shake from all the fur that's now all over it. We've swept 4 times in this room. I mopped the floor, and there's still cat fur everywhere. Gosh darn you, kitties. didn't matter so much until I was working with black wool, which is like Velcro. So I'm going to go ahead then, pull up a seat of some kind, probably sit on the ground actually, and we'll go ahead and show you what a whip stitch is, and we'll do the whip stitch. So is anyone actually working on anything today, or are you all just basically, all of my American followers, just basically absolutely stuffed from your meals? I didn't, because it's just me and my husband. We didn't do anything for Thanksgiving. It doesn't make sense for me to cook for 12 hours, cook and bake for 12 hours for just a half-hour meal and then a bunch of cleanup if it's just the two of us. But also, he doesn't like any traditional Thanksgiving food, so I'd be cooking for just myself. Yeah. Yeah, Thanksgiving isn't really any fun if you don't have friends or family to celebrate it with, honestly. Okay. Okay, so I've got this and this. I'm just going to go grab some tea, but I'm still here, so you can still hear me. Any questions about this procedure? I don't know. Oh, there's my teas over there. Any questions about how we are proceeding? Questions about the gown? Somehow we keep ending up on the topic of witchcraft, and I don't know. Yeah, people keep asking me about witchcraft in the Middle Ages, and it didn't occur to me that it really is that much of a terrible, terrible myth that is running rampant about medieval women being tried for witchcraft because they were powerful and alone, or because they were wise women, or they were practiced herbalism. It's just, it's not true. There's just no evidence of that, or minimal. And as often as not, men are getting tried for witchcraft as women are. It's just, yeah. But I'm talking Western Europe. If you go to Eastern Europe, Eastern Europe is not my area, right? Because I don't speak Slavic languages. I speak Western European languages. I don't speak Slavic languages. So I really am completely unknowledgeable about how things were in Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Poland, Slovakia, the Czech Republic. We're talking about the modern equivalents like Hungary, Serbia. Like I don't know anything about. I know very little about those places in the Middle Ages. I know more than the average person, but I don't know enough to say discourse on the frequency of witch trials in those parts of the world. So when I'm talking about history, generally, I'm talking about Western Europe, unless I specify otherwise. Yeah. Oh, this tea is so good. We're currently in Daegu, South Korea, and Japan is a 30-minute ferry ride from Busan, which is not far from here. So whenever I want to get Japanese green tea, I can just hop on the ferry and go buy some. It's nice. It's not bad. Let me see. Okay, so questions or comments? Yeah, for those just joining, welcome to my medieval sewing party. I am the Contessa, and today I'm working on my new Burgundian gown. If you're enjoying, please like and subscribe. I'm going to be getting back into a daily live stream rhythm, so this will become a daily event. Sometimes it will be medieval story time. And medieval story time will basically involve me reading from original medieval texts on a variety of topics. Sometimes it'll be literature, sometimes it'll be autobiographies, sometimes it'll be philosophy, sometimes literally from 15th century manuals of etiquette and how to run a household. And then we'll discuss the texts in more detail. So yeah, I do medieval sewing parties. We have medieval story time. I also do dance lessons or dance practices live stream, which I'm hoping we'll actually maybe get to do sometime this weekend, maybe tomorrow at some point. And, or tomorrow or Sunday. Tomorrow is Saturday, my time, Friday for most of you. So yeah. So if you like that idea, if you like the idea of this kind of content of exploring medieval material culture from a hands-on perspective. Oh, I also do medieval cooking time with the Contessa, and I'm probably going to be doing that tomorrow evening, my time, which will be middle of the night for some of you, or morning or midday for others of you. Yeah, because currently I'm in Daegu, South Korea, so I'm GMZ +9, basically. Okay, let me see. Is that a medieval carpet in the back or Persian? If you're talking about this, this is a medieval it's a replica of a medieval tapestry. Dates to about the 1480s or 1490s. And this is from, it's currently housed in the Musée de Cluny in Paris. It's from La Dame à la Licorne series, and each of these, it's a series of 6, the 5 senses plus desire. And this is the sense of hearing, because this is a lady playing a portative organ. Yeah, so this is a replica of one of those, of the tapestries. It's an entire, this was part of a suite of tapestries that was called a chambre, a chamber of tapestries that were woven to fit a very specific chamber in a castle. And that's why medieval tapestries tend to have odd shapes, even if they're in a series, because they're woven to literally fit around windows and doorways and fireplaces, so that all the walls are covered to basically act like wallpaper, or like like portable frescoes, portable wall paintings, right? Yeah, this is a medieval French, but this is a Turkish kalim that I just bought in Istanbul, and it has a pattern that you see in a lot of 15th century illuminations, because there was a big market for Turkish and Persian rugs in medieval Europe. And so this is a pattern that absolutely dates to the Middle Ages. And so when I saw this at a Turkish secondhand / antique store, I absolutely wanted to buy it. It's actually woven with horsehair and wool. You can see it's a kalim, right? You can see the horsehair, and then it's wool over top of that horsehair base. I love this so much. I just do. I'm going to put it here because I just love it. So it'll be nice and pretty in front of me. Yeah. So yes, this is medieval European. This is technically modern Turkish, modern-ish Turkish, like maybe 60 years old. But the pattern is absolutely one we see actually in medieval illuminations depicting rugs that are imported from Turkey or Persia in the era. Let's see. How long does a piece behind you take to make in medieval times? This tapestry? Oh God. So tapestry making was it took multiple people to make something like this. Because I mean, it depends on, what do you mean make? Like from what point? If you're talking from the very raw materials out, you're talking about the wool and the silk and the linen used to make it, and the dye stuffs used to dye the threads. And then the design, an artist would actually design this and then draw it onto the ground. And then the tapestry weavers would come and weave over top of that. I mean, one of these, if you take all of those stages of production into account, because it was all handwork from making the wool all the way out, you're talking about, God, I don't know, hundreds of hours. But even just to weave just this was probably 200 or 300 man hours. Just the weaving. Just the weaving, not even thinking about all the other production levels. Yeah, lots of hours. Yeah. Yeah, I love hard floors with rugs. Wall-to-wall carpeting, it's awful. I hate wall-to-wall carpeting. It's the most disgusting thing. Ugh, yuck, yuck, yuck. I like hard floors with nice rugs on them, because the rugs can be cleaned. You can take them to the cleaners and the cleaners will clean them. Whereas the wall-to-wall carpeting, no matter how much you vacuum it, no matter how much you power clean it with your wet vac, there's still lots of stuff deep down that's just not coming out. Ugh, gross. Yeah, tapestry weaving is absolutely, it does. It definitely takes genius level. Tapestry weaving is serious. Okay, I'm just moving this in so that you can watch me now whip stitch this panel on. Right, okay. Sewing poof. Okay, I think that's a good angle. Then you can see also the sewing. Get out my needle. These are, for those who are just joining my community and you haven't seen these yet, These are replica medieval needle and pin cases. Aren't they lovely? So it looks like a little tower, right? These are made by Billy and Charlie's Finest Pewter Wares. They are not a channel sponsor, but I have many of their products. They're pewter products, and they carve the molds, they do the casting all themselves. I think this one currently costs like $20. Pretty darn good price for a handmade pewter item, right? And you just put the needles or your pins inside of it like so. And it would actually suspend from a woman's belt, which you're probably then wondering, why is mine not suspended from my belt? Because I take this with me everywhere, even when I'm not wearing medieval clothes, to work on projects while I'm out and about. So that's why. So I've got my needle case, and then I will show you a replica spool of thread. Okay, so some of you have asked me, what do we do with the finger loop braiding, the laces, the sample laces that I make? Well, the sample laces that I make for my various classes and tutorials, I actually keep in a pouch that I have all this lovely finger loop braiding just kind of waiting for use. And then I can use it, for instance, to bind the loose end of thread on a medieval spool, because medieval spools don't have any little notches for keeping the thread from unwinding from the spool like a modern spool of thread does. So for that, I just wrap the spool up in one of my tester pieces for my finger loop braiding. This is one of the most complex braids you can do for one person. It's like a 37-step braid. And then I just wrap that around like so, and it keeps the thread from unwinding, and it's nice and pretty. And it protects it a little bit, when I'm transporting it around. Yeah. Agbirmi, hello, welcome to the community. Okay, so thankfully, I have this lovely black silk thread. You can see how shiny it is. This is actually from Korea, this black silk thread. The spools are not. The spools I bought at Pennsic. From whom did I buy them at Pennsic? Someone who actually makes them themselves. They actually turn them. Oh, yes. Don't feed the ravens. Okay. Don't feed the ravens. If you look them up, they focus mostly on first millennium replicas. They have very high quality items, but they do actually because they do wood turning, they also make these replica spools, which are 15th century, well, 14th, 15th century. So yeah, if you'd like to buy some spools like this, super reasonably priced. I think we paid $15, hand turned on a lathe. Look at that detail. Isn't that gorgeous? Hold on, sorry. There we go. Yeah, look at that detail. Isn't that gorgeous? So yeah, not a channel sponsor. I get no money from them for promoting their products. Can recommend, or feed the ravens. Feed the ravens. Don't feed the ravens, or feed the ravens. Look up Feed the Ravens, medieval reenactment goods. It should bring you to their website. Yeah, I can highly recommend their spools. They're really nice. Okay, so I'm just going to pull out one of the last surviving pins from my last round the world journey. Some of you may have known that I went to a lot of different places in a 6-week period. Took a 25-day cruise around the Mediterranean, from Barcelona to Turkey to Greece, back to Barcelona, all around Spain, and then up to Southampton, and then went to Germany, and then went to the US, and then finally went back to Korea. So I spent a lot of time on the road, which is unfortunately why I got completely off of my live streaming schedule, and now the algorithm is punishing me for it, but there it is. And so, yeah, that's why there was a big break in this project, because nothing went quite according to plan. Nothing ever goes according to plan when I travel, though. That's okay. I expect it. Honestly, I don't expect my travels to ever go as I plan them. So if they do actually go as planned, I'm kind of pleasantly surprised. So this thread is actually pretty thick. It's technically, I think it's supposed to be embroidery thread, but it actually works really well as medieval sewing thread, because medieval sewing thread is not as fine as modern sewing thread is. I mean, it was well woven and even, that's not what I mean, but it isn't as thin as modern thread tends to be. So I'm going to just use one layer of this because it's actually pretty sturdy. Also, and I've emphasized this before, and I will emphasize it again, Don't do what it is I'm about to do. Don't do that. You'll put a groove in your teeth. You always want your seams to, hey. Okay, I have no idea why we just disconnected and reconnected. No idea. But what I was saying is seams. Make your seams weaker than your fabric. Because, especially on the train, if someone steps on my train, and they will, I want the seam to rip, not the fabric. Remember, I showed you what happens when the fabric rips. You end up having to reconstruct it with thread and needle. But if my seams had been weaker, the seams would have ripped, and then all I would have had to do is whip stitch the seam shut. So pro tip for sewing garments, you want your seams to be weaker than the fabric. Seams are easy to fix, rips in the fabric, not so much. Yeah. Shellback Bean says, at this point, I feel weird when anything does go according to plan, right? Like, I wonder what kind of, honestly, when I travel, if things go according to plan, I wonder what penalty I'm going to have to pay in the future. How am I going to have to balance the scales of with the universe for this good fortune of things going according to plan? Is it cynical? Maybe, but also it's true. Generally, if something goes completely according to plan, not long after I end up having to pay by something going completely foobar. Yeah. Okay, so I now have some to think about this because I put everything down and I was talking to you all and I didn't actually think about, I'm gonna put my needle here so that I don't lose it. I didn't think about how these pieces, which pieces should go with which pieces. So, K-Makes, welcome to the Medieval Sewing Party, my Medieval Sewing Party. Thank you for joining us. Where are you currently located if you're interested in sharing, and are you working on anything project-wise? Okay, so we've got this panel here. And let's see, I've got this piece here. Shaking out the cat fur. How is this my life? So much cat fur. You know, I grew up with cats, but I never wanted cats as an adult because I travel a lot. And yet, the universal kitty distribution system keeps sending me cats. So I now have 3 here and 1 in the US. Oh, Frederick, awesome. I am originally from Delaware, so you are right around the corner. And I drive through Frederick twice a year on my way to and from a big medievalist event, Penzic, you may or may not know it, out in Western Pennsylvania, because from Delaware, Frederick is it's the diagonal, the hypotenuse, right? It's the shortest way to get there. I often go to one of the Dairy Queens in Frederick as a special treat because, you know, I don't usually eat that kind of food and I only get it when I'm back in the US, which isn't very often, thankfully. So yeah, Frederick is one of the places where there's a Dairy Queen really close to the highway. I know that might not be why you would think I would know Frederick, but there it is for its Dairy Queen. Okay, so the thing I'm now considering is there a difference in the sheen and which part I want to be attached to which part, right? So ideally, we would like the sheen to match up if it's possible. It's probably not quite possible, but at least I can get the same side with the fabric, right? Because as I said, there were 2 sides and they're very different. One is kind of more pilly and the other is more silky. Yeah, if that makes sense. Let me see. Oh, in Tamaqua, Pennsylvania. Awesome. Very cool. Another neighbor from the state. Yeah. I wonder if the cat hair can be collected and turned into a Persian rug. So I will be honest, the amount that these babies shed, I have thought to myself, there must be a way to make a profit from this. Or I must be able to do something with all of this damned fur, right? Oh, New York, very cool. Meeks, do you mean like the city or upstate New York? Because, you know, everyone knows that everything outside of New York City is upstate. Oh God, the bias of New Yorkers is fantastic. Okay. Okie dokie. Okay. Yeah, so if you have any questions, the format is I will be working on this medieval sewing project, a new gown, the kind that will go over this outfit actually. And if you have questions about medieval material culture or medieval history, feel free to pop them in the comments and I will attempt to answer them to the best of my eclectic knowledge. Or if you have questions about what it is I'm actually working on, questions about sewing or medieval handcrafts or medieval cookery, dance, music, feel free to ask them as well. Let me see. I have 6 kitties and often have the same thought. Oh, Catherine. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's okay. I thought I was crazy with my 4. Nope. And I don't mean crazy in a derogatory way because I think we all know that we're kitty servitors and we love our babies or our masters. But wow, 6, that's a commitment. I will be honest, I really do want to visit Kurdistan. It is on my list. There are some amazing archaeological sites in Kurdistan, really. Seriously. Yeah. Oh, let's see. My only concern right now, the only concern I have with places like Kurdistan is safety. You know, I have an American passport, so we're not necessarily welcome everywhere, and with good reason. Okay, let's see. Okay, so on this panel, this is the bottom of the skirt. So on this panel, the flow of the fabric is actually this direction. Now I'm petting it. It's so nice. It's so nice and silky. And unfortunately, on the panel that I have to add on, the flow is in the other direction, which I kind of guessed was going to happen, and that's okay. I guess I'll just make sure that it is actually the same side, at least, even if they're not going the same direction. That's more important to me, that it is the same side. So I have the silky side. Silky side is showing with silky side, and not so silky side is showing with not as silky side. I think that's what ultimately is going to matter in this equation. Okay. Okie dokie. Yeah, start this over here. So I'm going to pin this, and then I'm going to make certain that I've pinned it together correctly before I sew it. So that's another rule of sewing. Pin once, check once, pin again if necessary, then sew. Don't just pin and sew. You will regret your life choices. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I regret enough of my life choices without me being the cause of that regret. So whenever I can, I minimize self-inflicted life choice regret. Oh yeah, no, Kurdistan has excellent music and interesting traditional clothing. Handcrafts are really, like, there's a lot of things still done in Kurdistan the old school way, right? Not just, and I don't mean just traditional, I mean historical. So yeah, it's definitely there. Yeah, measure thrice, pin twice, cut once. Yep, exactly, shellback bean. Shellback bean, what kinds of things do you make? I know, I'm sorry if I've asked you this and you've said, and I apologize if I don't remember. My sleep not schedule over the last couple of weeks has kind of robbed me of my memories a little bit. What kinds of things do you make or sew? What's your area of interest? Yeah. Kurdish women dress is very beautiful. Absolutely, I agree. Sadie, I am not Amish, and you can tell I'm not Amish. For those who are from Pennsylvania, Amish people do not show this much of their skin ever, unless they're literally in the process of changing from one garment to another. That's how you can tell I'm not Amish. So this style of headdress is actually 15th century in origin, and this style is specifically 15th century. So I am actually a 15th century noblewoman dressed completely down in her underthings and her casual at-home clothing, basically. is what you are witnessing here. French, Flemish, what would be the Low Countries, so the Netherlands now, and also parts of England as well. Yep. No, Sadie, don't. No, Sadie, don't apologize. Please. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to be harsh, and I no need to apologize. Lots of people come on here and say I'm Amish, and I get it because if you're not, especially if you're not from Amish country, you may not realize that one of the main tenets of the Amish lifestyle is for women, especially, is modesty, but also for the men. It's modesty. It's all about modesty for the Amish, and simplicity, modesty and simplicity. Yeah. Whereas the dress I'm wearing has a big train and really full skirts that drag on the ground and is definitely not a modest garment. No. I'm sorry if I came across too harshly. That was definitely not my intent. Not my intent in the least. Yeah. Oh no, Sadie, don't feel badly, please. No. It's when people ask me if I'm Amish in earnest and in good faith, it doesn't bother me. It's when people come on and get cheeky about it that I get a little bothered. Shellback Bean says, I used to make mead when I was in the Navy. I did some fancy sailor rope work. Ooh, nice. I now mostly cook using my Japanese stove and my Traeger pellet smoker. Oh, nice. Nice. So were you, and if you don't feel comfortable answering this in the chat, it's fine. Were you in the US Navy or in the Japanese Navy? Yeah, being very closely affiliated with the US military, I understand about that lifestyle. And I dated a sailor once back in college. Yeah. And if I'd known then what I know now, I would have told him not to get out of the Navy. I would have told him to stay in until retirement. I just had no clue back then. Okay, so I'm now just pinning the additional piece on to the bottom of this skirt. And I'll show you my second case. This is my pin case. So my newer one is shinier, and this one is older, and you can tell it's been bent because I fly to most medievalist events. And so that means that my luggage gets thrown around by professional luggage gorillas. And that's not a slur on the people doing the work. I just swear that the way this luggage is abused, it must just be wild animals who handle them. And so that means that things get crushed and bent over time, invariably. Yep. Handsome, did you come back? Are you alive? Are you okay? Okay. Yeah. Yes, U.S. Navy from Ohio. I'm married to a Filipina here in Japan and stayed. Nice. We have 3 under 4 now. Wow. I was medically retired after 4. Yeah. I always tell people enough years in the military, tends to break a body. It really does. Oh, Takeda, you're there. Takeda, welcome. How was your Thanksgiving? For those of you who celebrate Thanksgiving, let me know how it went. I actually have friends in the US who made a bunch of medieval dishes for their Thanksgiving to, freshen it up a bit. And I thought that was pretty awesome. Now, they were sort of like parallel or somehow related to their modern equivalents, but the medieval versions of them. So I thought that was a pretty awesome and interesting way to do a Thanksgiving feast. And it's a way I might get the condottiero to support a Thanksgiving feast, right? We made medieval food instead of the modern traditional American Thanksgiving dishes. No, Takeda, I get it. I'm confident a lot of people have been sleeping off dinner. I am actually just attaching the extra fabric onto the bottom of the back panels of my new black wool Burgundian gown so that I can whip stitch the extra fabric on, and then I'm going to lay it back out and mark it and cut the trail. I'm calling it a trail at this point because train maybe makes it seem too glorious. Oh, Sadie, thank you for joining. Please come back and don't feel badly about mistaking for the Amish thing, but sleep well, and I do hope you come back. Takeda sent a Sunday. Thank you for that Sunday. Handsome, are the Sundays like the digital currency stuff? Okay. I'm There are so many new options on on this thing, YouTube, for ways to tip and give money to your favorite creators that I can't even keep track of it all. Iman Behtar, welcome. Thank you for joining me this evening. I am the creative Contessa. The Contessa, some know me as. Other people know me as Rachel, and I am a practitioner of medieval living history. I enjoy exploring medieval and historical material culture firsthand by making the clothes, making the food, recreating the dances, trying to explore as much of the beautiful side of an interesting and creative side of historical medieval culture as I can. Because there are, of course, unbeautiful aspects to any period of history. And I've decided that I don't necessarily need to explore those firsthand to understand them and what they were and how awful they were. Let me see. Shellback Bo says, I smoked 2 turkeys and made my cranberry sauce. Nice. 1 turkey was a traditional brine with cranberries added. Yummy. Ooh, and then a coffee rub. Ooh, yeah. The umami from that coffee rub, it'd be pretty good. The second is Cajun crawdad boil themed for parish potluck on Sunday. How are you? Well, you said you're from Ohio. So crawdads aren't really a big thing in Ohio, are they? Or is that just something you picked up as part of your travels in the King's Navy, as it were? Yeah, I love cranberries. I can eat cranberries raw, unsweetened. Love them. My cranberry sauce when I make it is literally just whole cranberries with a little bit of maple syrup, just enough to kind of temper that tang, and then cooked until the cranberries, half of them pop or something like that, and it gets enough of the pectin out to make a nice, like, thickening. The sauce is thickened, but it's not completely jello. And then sometimes I'll add a bit of orange zest or lemon to that to kind of give it a tang. If I'm feeling froggy, maybe I'll add some medieval sweet spices to add a little dimension, but I can literally just eat raw cranberries. Yeah, growing up, I loved the jellied cranberry so-called sauce, but I can't stand it now. It's just too sweet for me. It's what happens when you give up refined sugar, though, in medieval Europe, they didn't have cranberries. Of course, cranberries are New World. Many people may or may not know. But there is an equivalent, at least in Scandinavia. Lingonberries are basically Europe's answer to the cranberry. They're much smaller, but they're red and they're tart if you don't add sweet stuff to them. Of course, red currants are also pretty damn Johannisbeeren, as they're called in German. Yeah, they are also sweet as hell. Or not sweet, sour, nice and tart. That's why I love them. I love it when it's currant season in Germany, because you can just walk down the street and there's all these currant bushes and you can just pick currants and eat as you walk. Yum. Yum, 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 yum. Yum, yum, yum. But actually, I think currants are less tart than cranberries are, actually, now that I think about it. Doesn't anyone sleep around here? Well, Coolman, I'm actually in Daegu, South Korea, which means it's like 2 p.m., 2:20 p.m. Wow, look at that internal clock for the win. It's 2:20 p.m. So middle of the day for me. And actually, a lot of my followers tend to be night owls. It's okay. You couldn't know. How could you know with this medieval tapestry behind me where I am exactly? Let me see. That is how our friend did her cranberry sauce tonight, with pineapple as well. Oh, cool. Nice. I didn't think of the maple syrup. I do 2 pounds of frozen cranberries and the zest and the flesh of 2 oranges. Oh, well, the oranges, I mean, if you're doing like the flesh, like the whole orange, oranges have a lot of natural sugar in them. So actually, orange juice would be another good way to sweeten it, and it will just, concentrate down as you cook. Yeah, as well. So that's a good option as well. Honey, I sometimes use honey. Sometimes I've used coconut sugar, other sweeteners of a more natural type that I have used. Oh, I want to try this. I actually have some jotong in my cabinet. For those who don't know what jotong is, that is fermented brown rice syrup. So it is the brown rice it is the syrup that is a byproduct of fermenting brown rice in traditional Korean cuisine. And so they collect that syrup and it's full of micronutrients. It's like the molasses of Korea, basically. And it's really rich and it's not nearly as sweet as sugar is, or even as maple syrup is. And it has a really rich flavor profile. And so dochong is what is the traditional sweetener here that should be used in Korean marinades, in Korean desserts, but unfortunately it's expensive, really expensive. And so of course in Korean cuisine, if you go to a restaurant, dochong is never used. Bulgogi should be sweetened with dochong. Dakgalbi should be made with dochong, but that's not what you're going to get if you go to a Korean restaurant. You're going to get corn syrup if you go to a Korean restaurant. But I have a whole jar of dochong over there. So I've got a bag of frozen cranberries in my freezer. Today, I think I'm going to make my cranberry compote using dochong and see how that tastes, especially because the dochong, this one has dodok root in it, bellflower root in it. So it's got an extra flavor profile to it. I'm excited to see how that turns out. I'll let you all know. Let's see, shellback bean, 2 lemons, 4 limes, then sweeten until my wife can stand the tartness. I use whatever sugar I have on this. This year it was brown sugar. That's very cool. Yeah, lemons and limes, also a really good touch. Shellback bean, do you use the zest or just the juice? I'm a big fan of the zest because, of course, the zest is where all of those all those oils are that are the flavor giver, really, in citrus fruit that often just gets thrown away, unloved, right? And also, the zest has a lot of those micronutrients in it, right? That's where a lot of the vitamin C actually is. And the pith, for those who don't know, you should eat the pith. You should eat all of your citrus, the rind, the pith, the inside, because actually the pith has a lot of really important micronutrients, not just vitamins, but other things that are really good for our health and that are really health boosting. And by peeling your citrus and throwing away the rind, you are throwing away most of the nutritional value of your citrus fruit. Just putting that out there. But if you don't know the citrus grower, you should definitely wash your fruit with salt and vinegar before you consume the rind. That will usually take away the food wax that might be on it and other garbage that might be on it as well. I wonder how cranberry would taste cooked in mirin. Oh, yeah. Man, that would be good. I'm confident that would not suck. This is so stupid. I've never thought of adding any alcohol to my cranberry sauce. What is wrong with me? It's like I don't even know how to cook. That would be really good. Oh, goodness. Why didn't I ever think about that before? I think I have, I don't have any mirin at the moment, real or otherwise, real or imagined. No, I know what you meant, because there's a lot of garbage cooking mirin out there, just like there's garbage cooking wine or cooking sherry out there. Yeah. Everyone, cooking tip. Medieval, modern, or otherwise, do not use or purchase anything labeled, any alcohol labeled cooking. It's garbage, it's expensive and overpriced, and it's filled with salt and sugar usually. Don't do it. Just get a cheap, real version of that thing. Rice wine, I use sake. I cook with sake. If it's, sherry, get the real sherry. If the recipe calls for red wine, get real red wine or real white wine. Do not get the cooking wine. It's absolute garbage, and you pay way too much for it, and it will not make things taste good. Oh, rum would be good. Rum would probably be very good. Yeah. Especially if it's a decent quality rum. Oh, Grand Marnier. Yeah. Yes, that would be amazing. Oh, yeah, because of that orange flavor and it's sweet anyway. Yes, good suggestion. Yeah, 2 buck chuck or equivalent is great for cooking. Yeah. I always tell people you should cook with something that you would also be okay drinking. Now, it doesn't have to be like the finest wine, but if you're not happy drinking it, you probably shouldn't cook with it either. What style of clothing you're wearing? I love it. The great Elijah, welcome to Medieval Sewing Party with the creative Contessa. I'm the Contessa. You are seeing a 15th century, typical 15th century ensemble from 15th century France, the Low Countries, Flanders, what would be modern day Belgium, and parts of England, right? And I'm basically wearing, I'm a 15th century noblewoman currently cosplaying as a peasant because I'm not wearing all the layers. I'm not wearing the gown that should go over top of this. So yeah, that is how I am currently attired. This is called a smock in 15th century English. This is called a kirtle in 15th century English. And this is a kerchief or a couvre-chef or a cover chef or a cover chief. There's about 20 spellings in English for this kind of headdress.
19 chips.
Oh my God.
Variety.
Wow. I thought it was a giant jar of pickles. I'm like, what the hell is that? It's scary. Okay, so just to show you what I've just done, I might have to redo it because I was so focused on talking about food that I didn't pay good close attention. Okay, so I have now pinned, you can see the shine of the pins, the little extra bit of fabric onto the bottom of the skirt. I just ran my finger into the pin, which is a very common danger in sewing. Okay, so I pinned that, and I have indeed, I'm going to double check, but I have successfully used both shiny sides. Both sides are the shiny side, so it's shiny side to shiny side, less shiny side to less shiny side. Check. And actually, you might even already be able to see the difference in the shine. Can you, is it showing up in the light? Can you tell a difference between the shine, the way the shine goes on the top and the way the shine goes on the bottom? I literally don't know because, as you can probably tell, I can't see at this point. Yeah, so Elijah, if you're interested in learning about medieval material culture from someone who experiments with it firsthand, learning about medieval history, about other histories as well, because I'm just kind of a history person, then please do like and subscribe and, hit the notification bell. Okay, so that panel is ready to lay out and double check. And now we will go for the next 2 panels. Okay, so again, I'm going to just double check which is the shinier side and which is the less shiny side, or differently shiny side. Just make sure that the right textures are basically on the same side. Okay. And if I can, in fact, accomplish that. Okay. And the other thing I have to remember, I have to make certain that I have a right and a left and not 2 lefts and not 2 rights. That's kind of an important thing. And basically based on the pattern, right? Because ideally I want the shiny side out on all the panels, the shinier side out on all the panels.
And your image is reversed. Just so you know.
Oh, right, yeah. No, that's what I'm going to check here on me, not not there. Yeah.
There was a question about this earlier.
Oh, there was. Okay.
What were you reading with the wine thing?
What was the name of the wine curing book? Okay. This is called a medieval, oh, it's mirrored. Sorry. It's called a medieval home companion. It's called a medieval home companion. And these are excerpts, translated excerpts from the Goodman of Paris, the Ménagier du Paris, originally written in French, composed in French in the 1390s, 1391, they think, actually. And this version is nice because it's excerpts, pretty interesting excerpts. It ignores most of the kind of tedious moralizing sections. It only presents a couple of the moralizing sections so you get an idea of medieval morality, but it doesn't, there's not a whole volume of it, which there is in the original. There's not like 200 pages of it. And it's pretty inexpensive. We got this one for $2.99. So a medieval home companion for the win. Really fascinating stuff.
Check your local used bookstore.
Check your local used bookstore, and if they don't have one, then Abe Books, right?
Especially if you're in a college town.
Yeah, especially if you're in a college town, because I think this book gets used in college classes, probably. But yeah, the whole version, there is a new translation, I think from 2009, of The Goodman of Paris into English that I would recommend if you want to see the whole thing. But otherwise, the Medieval Home Companion is the more, more condensed excerpts, selections from the original one. Yeah. What would medieval tailors have pinned with, since they didn't have a lot of steel, or am I incorrect? They didn't have steel, but they had iron. But also pins were often copper or copper alloy made of latten. So copper, bronze, or other copper alloys. So they used pins. They had pins. Pins literally hold medieval society together. They were made en masse, even though there weren't machines. It was just people making them en masse. There were literal. This is where the word pin money comes from, because there was a separate accounting line for money just for pins for men and women, because garments were held, the layers of various garments and headdresses were held together, and veils were just held together in large part by pins. Tailors use them. Sewists use them. And there's for example, in the trousseau, the wedding trousseau of Princess Joan, Edward III, one of Edward III's, his ill-fated daughter, one who died on the way to her wedding in Portugal. She died of plague in Bordeaux, basically, while she was sailing to Portugal. In her massive wedding trousseau, she has about 12,000 pins. So yeah, they use pins. They definitely use pins. But were they necessarily iron? Not necessarily. They could be iron, not steel so much, but iron. And they could also, very often, a lot of the pins that have survived are copper alloy, whether they're dress pins or veil pins or sewing pins. Sometimes it can be hard to tell. Unfortunately, pins that were probably used for sewing, the really fine ones, they probably haven't really survived very much because they were fine. So they're going to corrode away almost entirely in the archaeological record. Whereas the thicker, heavier pins used for different, like holding dress layers together will be thicker. And therefore are more likely to survive in the archaeological record. So we have to remember, when we're looking at extant pieces, what has survived from medieval material culture, we have to remember that there will be an inherent bias in the archaeological record based on what sorts of materials are more likely to survive over time, based on the conditions of the soils in which a particular culture exists, because the sorts of items that will survive, that will persevere for centuries in Italy, it'll be different kinds of materials than will persevere for centuries in Ireland, than in France, than in England. Yeah. So we have to, or Ayutthaya, right? Like in Thailand, right? It was mostly a stone. You would think it was a stone city, because in Ayutthaya in Thailand, the old capital of Siam that was burnt basically to the ground at the end of the 18th century, you would walk in and think, well, it must have just been an entire stone capital, but no. It's just that the wooden buildings all burnt up and the stone didn't. So yeah, you have to remember that there might be an inherent bias in the archaeological record that might skew our understanding of medieval material culture, which is why I always refer to, I'm sorry, my finger and its splint, which is why I always talk about the trinity of medieval, of research. And that is archaeological finds, documentary evidence, and art, right? Visual evidence. Those three together will give you the best idea about any culture and its material history. You can never rely on just one, because there will always be a different kind of bias in each of them. Yeah. Let me see. Oh, Benny Keebs, welcome. Right. You finally caught me live. Fantastic. Welcome back. I am currently in Daegu, South Korea. Yep. Let me see. Yeah, so welcome, Skylar, and welcome back, Benny. So good to see you again. I was wondering, I never got to see you again in the stream. Well, it's all a question of timing, right? To be honest, I haven't been doing much live streaming from my Creative Contessa channel because I just like the traveling completely threw me off my game. It really did. But I'm back. I'm back. Welcome back. It's good to see you again. Yeah, let me see. Did I miss any good questions? Okay, good. All caught up. Knock my tea back. Okay, so a note on tea. Some of you are going to ask me, was tea medieval? In Asia, absolutely. In Europe, tea leaves, true tea, as in cha, as in tea leaves. No, not in medieval Europe, not at all. But they did have tisanes, and the word tisane is actually used in the Good Men of Paris for the kinds of beverages that are made from like roots and herbs and whatnot. That is not just water and it's not alcohol. So if it's infused water is called a tisane in medieval French, and that's where we get the word tisane in modern English, right? So in medieval Europe, they absolutely had tisanes, just not tea, just not cha, not Camellia sinensis, right? Not proper tea leaves, but they definitely did water infused with lots of other things for health reasons, but also sometimes it seems for flavor based on what the Good Men of Paris says about. It's about serving guests, tisanes. And usually you're not really going to have guests if they're sick, because if they're sick, they shouldn't be in your house as a guest. So yeah, he talks about making, and he provides instructions for tisanes, making and serving tisanes and the kinds of things that can go into them. And it's, you know, it's roots, it's herbs, leaves and flowers that are, you know, grow like weeds basically around, in this case, around Paris, that he prescribes for tisanes. So they definitely had flavored water in the medieval European world. No. Yeah, in some countries they call it cha, like Portugal. Yeah, so there's an interesting linguistic difference between who calls it tea and who calls it cha, and it depends on when and how it came to you, right? So if you call it cha, generally, it's because, if Portugal calls it cha and not tea, not te, they don't call it te. Interesting. So places that call it te or tea received it, basically got it via ship, and it came very late in their culture. But the countries, especially in Eastern Europe, that call it cha or some chai, some kind of, you know, derivative of that, got it by land through the land trade routes, and usually got it earlier than the people who call it tea or te or any combination thereof. Portugal's always weird though. No, in a good way. I mean that in a very good way. I'm descended from Portuguese on my mom's side of the family. Yeah, I completely mean that with all the love in the world. I love Portugal and I love Portuguese culture. It's fascinating. Portuguese history is really interesting. And it doesn't surprise me that Portugal would call it something different than the rest of Western Europe. Yeah, exactly, because the Portuguese were the first ones to navigate down and around the Horn of Africa, right, and get up to Asia via ship from Western Europe. Yep, absolutely, 100%. It's why there's so much is different in Portugal than in other places. And yeah, I mean, the Portuguese were the first Europeans to create sugar plantations, for instance, to colonize, to create sugar plantations. So yeah. Lead avant-garde in so many ways. Char is tea in Cockney slang. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. As a linguist, I love that stuff. When will Ryan stream another lute practice? They want to know. Didn't Crusaders have tea in Outremer? No, there is no record of tea having reached the Levant in that era. No, not that I'm aware of. The tea trade just hadn't made it that far for whatever reason, and I don't know why. They didn't have coffee either, by the way. Coffee hadn't made it that far up either, even though it was there in Ethiopia and Yemen, I think. Yeah. Okay, back to pinning. Let me take another little swig of tea here. Been talking a while. Ooh, and I need a stretch too. Oh, stretchies. Everyone get up and stretch. If you've been sitting for a while, stretch. Get the blood back in your limbs. Come on, everybody. Don't be too sedentary. You can watch me on an elliptical cross trainer, by the way. Serving suggestion for my live streams, do it on a treadmill. Consume medieval sewing parties on treadmill if you're not actually sewing. Oh, yep, stretch. Stretch. Oh yeah, that feels so good. Did a kickboxing workout this morning. It left me a little sore. But I punch and kick with ferocity, so yeah. Okie dokies. Oh no, I just dumped the pins out. I dumped the pins all over the floor.
Oh my God, woman, you're trying to terrify me.
It's okay, they're only on the kalim. And
terrorism.
In a cute little pile. Okay, so what was I doing before we got on that that rant? Or, oh, whatever. Okay, so I was making certain that my 2 panels of this dress, as much as possible, basically have the same side facing forward, facing out, so that they have basically the possibility of having the same texture, I guess we'll put it that way. Okay, yep, that's going that way. That's going that way. Okay, and yes, good. I have a right and a left. Yay! And not 2 rights and not 2 lefts. Fantastic. Outstanding. So exciting when that works out. It doesn't always work out. Okay. Now to pin on the next panel. Here we've got my little additional bit right here. Scrap, basically, an offcut. And as some of you know, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I love using offcuts to finish up the garment because nothing feels more medieval than minimizing one's waste. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. I'm less concerned about, I will say I'm less concerned about the train, being all the same sheen and everything, because it's a little piece at the back. The train is maybe too grand a word. Oh, are we about to get some loot practice?
Sure.
Oh, Susan, your wish is the condottiero's command. He is about to do some loot practice. Just need to make certain that I have enough past the seam to pass the back seam in order to continue that line.
There you go.
You can get the other microphone, right?
No.
Did you say no?
I don't want to over.
Oh, you don't want to overwhelm. Okay, then they'll just get some nice tea. We'll see. I'll ask them how it sounds with the tinkling, and we'll see what happens.
Oh shit! I need my glasses though.
Oh wait, sorry, I just missed a whole bunch of comments. Would a purple dye or some variant have been possible for clothing in medieval times? Absolutely.
Fake Tyrion.
Mikil, I am so sorry. I don't know the origin of your name, so I'm probably just horribly butchered it. I'm so sorry. Linguistic origin of your name. As a linguist, I try to always pronounce things correctly when I can. Yeah, so purple dyes depends on when and where in medieval times. So up until 1204, you could have, if you were attached somehow or affiliated with Constantinople and the Eastern Roman Empire, you could have had Tyrian purple. Now, in 1204, the Crusaders sacked the city and Tyrian purple production died and never came back. That was when it literally ended, and that's why it's kind of a little bit of a mystery as to how it was done and why we've had to reconstruct the art of Tyrian purple dyeing. Tyrian purple is one of like 3 or 4 snails, sea snails. Murex is one of them, just one of them, and I don't remember the scientific names of all the other ones. There's a couple of different murex, and then this 4th one that's a different thing kind of altogether, right? And it's just the upper bronchial gland, transbronchial gland, hyperbronchial, right? Hypobronchial gland.
I know it's in your notes.
Yeah, hypobronchial gland. Just one little gland in the snail that was used to create the purple. And basically, I just watched this process in action, actually, on a documentary. Basically, you have to cut out the gland, and then you have to wash it a lot, because you want to make sure you don't get dirt and sediment into it. And then you ferment it for a couple of days with some water in the gland. And that's what produces the purple. And then you add the purple to you strain the gland out, and you strain the dye stuff into a vat, right? And then you have to keep the sun from actually light from coming in contact with the dye stuff. Otherwise, it will change it to blue. So this is a really stinky process, and it takes like 10,000 snails to make 30 grams of dye or something like that. It's an insane number of glands to dye stuff ratio. And if it's a hand process, right? There's no machine that can remove the snails from their shells, because you have to pull the snails out of the shells and then cut the gland out. So you can imagine how labor intensive this was. And you needed a lot of snails to produce enough purple to actually make your fabric a nice shade. What's interesting is I just read an archaeological report from the Antiquities Authority of Israel. They've just finished scientifically, chemically analyzing 180 textile finds from the Dead Sea Scroll caves. Same caves that have all those scrolls, right? So 2,000 years old. And thankfully these remnants, these textile remnants, were well preserved. And they found that some of the purples and blues, but only a few, like 4 out of 180 samples, were actually Tyrian purple or Tyrian blue. But the others were part of a luxury fake industry, a fake luxury industry that existed even during the Roman Empire. So they were dyed using madder and woad. So madder is a red root actually, that produces red. And woad is a green weed that produces blue with the right chemical stimulation. So they were dyed with madder first and then over-dyed with woad to create a purple that resembled Tyrian purple. So even in ancient Rome, they had Brada brand tunics. Or Canel or Gookie, right? So yeah, Jimmy Choos or Jimmy Shoes, right? So yeah, apparently there was a fake luxury trade in ancient Rome. So that would be the way to make purple, but only up until 1204, and that would have been an extremely expensive, extremely luxury purple. But the other way to make purple, one of the other ways to make purple, was to dye your fabric red and then over dye it blue. So red can be achieved a couple of different ways. Cheaper, it can be achieved with madder, which is that red root I mentioned. And then over dyed with woad, that green weed I mentioned. But on the expensive purple side, you could dye it with kermes, which is a louse. And that would have been the red that would have been used, the material that dye stuff, louse, that would have been used to achieve this red that you see here, right? So you could dye it with kermes first, very expensive, only basically lives in the Mediterranean on a specific kind of oak tree. And then you could over dye it with a blue like woad, and that would create a beautiful purple. So yeah, purple was absolutely possible and absolutely done in a variety of shades. And as many people have pointed out, even Tyrian purple is not a standard shade. They didn't have standard shade cards back in the Middle Ages and in antiquity. By the way, Tyrian purple, that's been happening for 4,000 years. So 4,000 years ago, humans in the Levant started dyeing things Tyrian purple. Talk about super advanced. Because that's not like, yeah, apparently they do ooze purple if you find a dead one on the seashore. But to figure out how to replicate that purple, yeah, that would take some experimentation. So yeah, they've been doing Tyrian. Humans have been started doing Tyrian purple 4,000 years ago, and even amongst the so-called Tyrian purple, it's called Tyrian because it was originally created by the Phoenicians supposedly in Tyre. Right, that's why it's called Tyrian purple. The origin story is anyway that the Phoenicians invented it, and in their city of Tyre, Tyrian, Tyre, and then there were just different kinds of shades depending on how much sunlight accidentally came in contact with that dye bath, depending on how long it was allowed to dye, depending on which of those 4 sea snail varieties I mentioned. Because they all kind of produce different degrees of purple or blue. So it wasn't one single color of purple. The word Tyrian purple refers more to the idea that it was an expensive purple, that it was a rich purple, and that it comes from the murex, from one of these 4 cultivars is not what we call animals, breeds, strains, species, subspecies of sea snails. Or species of sea snails. The gentleman I watched who's living in Tunisia, who has recreated this process, he actually said that once they cut that gland out, they actually cook and eat the snails. No waste. What he didn't say, though, was if it was actually a tasty meal or not.
Do we really like eating these snails? Remember, we've got 4,000
Yeah,
pounds
that's
of
right.
snail.
We have a lot of snails, so we need to eat them. So we're going to eat them.
You will eat your snail and you won't like it.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, now I wonder, how does a murex taste when it's cooked? How does murex taste when it's cooked?
Wow, you look like a living painting. I meant it as a compliment.
Oh, thank you. I take that as a compliment. How did I miss that, or has it not come my way? Oh, there it is.
I don't know if you've seen it yet.
Oh, Freiro, thank you. I appreciate that. That's a lovely compliment. Yeah. So even Rome had Temu or Wish or AliExpress. Yeah, they're equivalent thereof. Absolutely. Yeah, because Rome, ancient Roman society was highly mechanized is maybe the wrong word, but they had very efficient mass production processes for everything because they had a massive slave labor force, right? So yeah, they were able to produce things in mass that would in the Middle Ages become luxury items, like glass. Glass was not such a luxury item in ancient Rome the way it was in medieval Europe. Rest in peace, the medieval sea snails. Yeah, add garlic and anything tastes good. White wine helps, yeah. Yeah, so true. Add garlic, wine, and butter to anything, and it's fine.
Areas producing Tyrian purple at outlandish garlic and butter consumption. Ooh, somebody from Spain.
Oh, do we have someone from Spain?
Yeah.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
Rosa MV.
Yeah, Rosa. Bienvenida o bienvenido. Yeah, welcome. Thank you for joining. Let me see. Areas producing Tyrian purple had outlandish garlic and butter consumption. Yeah. Welcome to my medieval sewing party. I am the creative Contessa, and today I'm working on a new gown to go over top of this ensemble that you see me wearing. I am currently wearing my undergarments. 15th century undergarments, of course, but still undergarments nevertheless. Well, you were doing so well. Oh, question. Can you all hear that tinkling in the background, the tinkling of the lute? And is it pleasant or not? If otherwise, we'll mic him up and then you can hear it more directly. Murex in your paella for the supreme gastronomic treat. Right? Yeah, garlic, wine, and butter, the real triplets for cooking. Absolutely. It's really interesting because in medieval dishes, garlic is not used very often in the dish itself, but there are lots of sauces with crap tons of garlic in them. Because medieval cuisine is really heavily predicated on the idea of adding sauces to, or having sauces to complement the dish. So roasts, lots of roast. Medieval upper class cuisine is very roast heavy. And so you would have all of these lovely, very zesty, spicy, aromatic sauces, you know, sour and sweet, lots of garlic, as an accompaniment for those roasts, rather than actually cooking the flavor into it necessarily. It's a different way of viewing how you eat cuisine, yeah, how you consume things. Yes, I'm enjoying the lute. Fantastic. Perfect volume for the lute. Excellent. Okay, do I teach formally? I do. If you mean, do people pay me to teach classes? Yes, I do actually. I do teach classes, but I don't work for a university or a school. I go to events, gatherings and conferences and teach there. Also, I offer my own classes through my website. Zoom, usually via Zoom. In fact, people have been asking again for a workshop on how to make the kerchief that I'm making now. So I think in January, I'm going to might even schedule something over Christmas, actually, now that I think about it, because people might have time over Christmas. So keep your eye out. I'm going to give it a try and see what happens. I'm going to be doing, it's a 3-workshop session, 2 hours each, hand sewn. I show you all the techniques you need to know to make exactly this, all the hand stitches. We go through it together. We draft the pattern, lay it out, cut it together, how to put it together, and then how to put it on at the end. So that will be offered through my creativecontessa.com website. And I like to do a pay what you can option for the workshop so that even people who don't necessarily have any money can still participate. This is what I do for a living though, so I hope some people will pay for the workshop. But it's a pay what you can format. You just, at checkout, you enter in the tip box however much you feel you can comfortably pay, what you think the class is worth. And then we go through it together step by step. All the workshops, my classes and workshops are always recorded and shared with all participants so that even if you can't attend it live, you can still catch up on your own and refer to it again later on. So if you've forgotten something or need to review something, you have that option. So yeah, I teach online and I teach in person. The in-person classes, people tend to hire me and then I travel to them. And I do travel all over the world to teach all kinds of subjects on medieval material culture, including medieval cooking and dance. So that was a great question. Let me see. The lute is awesome. Oh, music for earthworms. Hello, music for earthworms. Thank you for joining us again. The lute is awesome. Tell your husband, well done. Ha, take that. He doesn't believe in himself. He has a low self-esteem. So thank you for sharing the compliments for the condottiero, everyone. Let me see. Okay, so that was that question. Since the 20th century, the main food ingredient is flour, sugar, and oil. Yeah, so true, especially the sugar. And industrial oils are really bad for us. You all buy industrial oils. I mean, most of the seed oils. Which are produced in ways that actually make them very unhealthy for you. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Let me see. Since the 20th century, people started dying from heart attacks. Yeah, there's been the data about cardiovascular health and the rise of sugar and industrial oils and refined carbohydrates is pretty compelling. Let me see. Garum is very similar to Worcestershire sauce. Yeah, like garum is disgusting Worcestershire sauce. No. Garum. No judgment. Garum is basically fish sauce, right? And the way they make fish sauce in Asia, as far as I know, is not terribly different in Southeast Asia is not terribly different from the way the Romans made garum. So for those who don't know what garum is, it is fish intestines that have been fermented, basically. Fish guts that have been fermented. With some salt, and it produces a liquid that is very umami rich. So that fifth flavor, right? The savory flavor, the flavor enhancing flavor. And Roman cuisine uses garum very, very heavily. And we know this from cooking collections of recipes like that Apicius, although there's debate over whether Apicius was actually a real person. Whatever, I'm not going to get into that debate here because I haven't actually looked deeply enough into it to explore, but I have explored his recipes. And fish sauce appears pretty prominently. Now, apparently the Romans also like to kind of put fish sauce on everything. I think it's Seneca, but don't quote me on this. One of the Roman writers, I think it was Seneca, complains about the way his fellow Romans just drown everything in garum with no regard for the flavor profile. Sort of the way a lot of, say, Americans drown everything in ketchup with no regard for the flavor, or barbecue sauce with no regard for the flavor profile. I appreciate the flavor enhancing properties of small quantities of very high quality fish sauce being added to foods. I do not like anything if the primary flavor is fish sauce though. It's just, I wasn't raised eating fish. So seafoody tasting things that taste like the ocean at low tide, I don't like. Yeah. Let me see. What have you studied? Actually, I'm a linguist by trade originally and a professional translator. My hobby has been history for basically all my life, though. And recently, the machines ate my career as a professional translator. So I'm hoping that my career as a living historian will be one of the last things to be eaten by the machines, because hopefully people like you, wonderful people like you, will always want to understand how things are made by hand, are made the traditional way, will want to see it demonstrated, will want to understand the history behind it. And I'm hoping that the machines will never take that from me. Here's hoping. Unfortunately, on the content creation side of things, the machines are taking my work. Literally, you can see horrible AI accounts, bots, producing garbage videos with misinformation at an astounding rate. So, yeah.
Nevis, that's hilarious.
Let me see. I anyways forget about fish sauce. I like using it in my cooking, but I always forget that it exists. Wife hides my ingredients. Nice. Neva says, my mother, who used to love fish sauce, lost all appetite for it after seeing a video demonstrating its creation. Yeah, I have seen the step-by-step process for creating fish sauce, and it's disgusting. Best not to watch. Sometimes it's good not to understand how our foods are made, right? Ignorance can, in fact, just be bliss. Let me see. Let me see. On a ship, we used hot sauce and everything. Yeah. I know in the Navy, it's like the only flavor giver is hot sauce. And honestly, having been on a Navy ship and eaten at the mess hall, I can understand why. It is true people before 150 years ago used to get sick for a week or two before they died. Now they just drop dead. Definitely because of certain foods. I mean, yeah, so infectious diseases were the problem, before. Here's the horrible thing about the West, right? We finally get an idea about how to get microbial diseases and infections under control. And we do. We develop antibiotics that save hundreds of millions, if not billions of lives over in the time since we've had them, right? Especially vaccinations. And if there are any anti-vaxxers out there, I don't want to hear it. I am a pro-vaxxer, and this is not the forum for that. But anyway, in the meanwhile, we started consuming industrial foods that are processed in ways that make them literally inflammatory and toxic for us, not to mention the environmental footprint of that. So we get more health on the infectious disease side of things, but we surrender vast quantities of health on the nutrition side of things. Yeah, it was a horrible exchange. It shouldn't have to be an exchange either. I wish it weren't an exchange. Nobby, what's wrong, little baby?
There's food.
So my little tabby rescue baby, who's a little over a year old now, actually a year and a half at this point, her mother abandoned her when she was about 5 to 6 weeks old because she was not thriving, and the mother wanted to focus on the thriving kittens. So we rescued her. Unfortunately, that means we rescued her when she was still in the nursing phase. And so she never got that shot of pheromones that tells her she's not really a kitten anymore. So when she goes to the litter box, and comes back. She comes and meows at us because she wants us to lick her butt for her, because that's what a mommy kitty would do. A mommy kitty would clean her butt for her. So yeah, if you can hear that tiny little mewing in the background, that's her wanting us to clean her bum for her. No, we don't do it, in case you're wondering.
Clean your own bum.
Let's see. Soulless AI videos will never replace you all. Thank you, Music for Earthworms. Appreciate that. Sausage and garum, never ask too many questions or watch it being made. Yeah, no kidding. Okay, let me see. Do the Amish use vaccines? I actually don't know. I'm not Amish. Just to get that out there. I wish I could have a pinned comment for everyone who joins the live stream. Not Amish, not dressed like an Amish person, dressed like a 15th century peasant / craftswoman, actually, at the moment. I actually don't know whether about the Amish and their healthcare, believe it, even though I grew up in Amish country. Oh dear. Okay, everyone. I am on the last 5% of my battery, my phone's battery, and I'm getting kind of hungry, so I need to eat my first meal of the day. It's almost 3 o'clock and I haven't eaten yet. Okay, are there any final questions? Otherwise, I would like to thank my patrons and my channel members for supporting my work. People like Music for Earworms, who do the super chat thing or give me Sundays, who financially support me and allow me to do this. For all of you who just hit the thumbs up, who subscribe, who leave comments and participate, thank you once again for helping me build this beautiful community. And if you've enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. I will probably be coming on later on today to keep working on this thing with you all. So at the very least, it'll be tomorrow my time. Later in the day for the rest of you will be the next medieval sewing party or medieval cooking party or some kind of live medieval party. Stay tuned. Hit the notification bell and click all if you'd actually like to be notified when I do things like go live or publish videos that are not AI. I think AI is the devil and I avoid it at all costs. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. Have a lovely morning, afternoon, and evening, and I hope to see you all soon again. Until then, stay creative, everyone.